and we are joined by Abraham Bolden from Chicago. Abraham, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for inviting me, Lynn.
Before we get into you have a new book, and I'd like to talk about that and help promote and discuss that. Just give maybe a brief background of yourself for listeners who may not be too familiar who you were in the early days there. And
yes, Lynn, I was born in East St. Louis, Illinois. It's a poor, little small town in southern Illinois. Then I went into the United States Secret Service after serving 4 years on the Illinois State Police. And I went into the United States Secret Service in October of 1960, where I met John Kennedy.
Right, and it was upon meeting him that you got that promotion to Washington.
Yes, it was, and the way I met him was very fateful in itself. Let me just explain how this happened. I was a new agent in the Secret Service in April of 1961. I had only been there a few months. So the president was coming to Chicago in order to thank Mayor Dealey here for his support in electing the president of the United States. And so now I was stationed in a washroom at McCormick Place, and that's not a very good detail. Normally a Chicago policeman would handle that detail. And as I bring out in my book that go from Dealey Plaza, the agents, when I was assigned that detail at the washroom at the lower level where I could drive, the agents laughed and they, cajoled me concerning the assignment that I had. So I was standing there in front of the washroom when the president's motorcade pulled up at about 8:30 in front of McCormick Place, and as fate would have it, the first thing the president wanted to do was use the washroom. So I'm standing there, and the president, he's walking down the steps towards me, and he is with Mayor Dealey and many of the Chicago dignitaries. When he comes down the steps, he stopped right in front of me, and I thought this was rather strange, and there was a sincere smile on his face, and he looked me right in the eyes, and he asked me, he says, "Are you a Secret Service agent, or are you one of Mayor Daley's finest?" Meaning one of Mayor Daley's Chicago policemen, because I was in plain clothes, you see. And I told him I was a Secret Service agent. And after one of the agents told him my name, he said, "Mr. Bolden," he said, "let me ask you a question." He said, "Have you been a Negro assigned to the presidential White House detail in Washington, D.C.?" And I told him, "No, not to my knowledge, Mr. President." He said, "Would you like to be the first?" I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. President." He said, "I'll be looking forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C." And I'm telling you, it was just wonderful, meeting the president and seeing that sincere smile on his face and being invited to come to Washington, D.C. on the Secret Service White House detail. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I can even hear the enthusiasm in your voice as you're recalling the story, how many years ago, right?
Yes,
For him to say, "You want to be the first? Come on down,"
Yes, that's right, and I was grateful to him very much.
Your promotion to Washington turned out to have a bittersweet taste to it, because you go on to say that once you got there, you found the Secret Service guarding that administration had no respect at all or anything.
Yes, that's right. As a matter of fact, I was very disappointed, as I explained in my book. Now, that was the disappointing circumstance of it. The first thing I ran into was this oppressive racism that was within the Secret Service itself. Now, I had expected to encounter some racism outside of the Secret Service, but I didn't expect to encounter the amount of racism that I found within the agents who were surrounding the President Kennedy. As a matter of fact, some of them were making some disparaging remarks about the president and making statements like, if anyone fires a shot at him, I wouldn't protect him. I wouldn't give my life for him. And I thought this was a horrible attitude for agents around the president to have, because that was our main duty. Our number one duty was the protection of the president and his family. But some of the agents didn't agree with his stand on civil rights and the things that he was doing in trying to get the civil rights and things for all Americans in the United States. They didn't agree with that. And as a result, this racism thing, they began to, focus in on me because I was there and I was handy, and I I was the butt of a lot of jokes and a lot of name calling, as a matter of fact, from agents of the Secret Service. Now, as the detail went, I was assigned to the president, and I was standing in front of his door one day in the White House, as a matter of fact, and the cabinet meeting was breaking up. Now, I'm telling you this just to show you the type of person that the president was, the affable gentleman that he was. And as they were breaking up the meeting, the door was left open leading into the president's office. So I leaned in to close the door. I was stationed right in front of his door, and he looked up and he saw me. And the president came rushing towards me. He said, Bolden, he said, Mr. Bolden, he says, I see that you made it here. And I was utterly shocked. Now, here's a man who had Vietnam on his mind. He had the integration on his mind. He had all of these different terrible problems that were facing him in the United States, and he, as the leader of the free world, was trying to solve. And he remembered my name, called me Mr. Bolden. And from there, he introduced me to some of his cabinet members, and then Hubert Humphrey, and who was a senator at that time, Barry Goldwater. And when he got to Pierre Solinger, now this took the cake, he introduced me to Pierre Solinger. And Solinger was an avid baseball fan. I think he was a New York Yankees fan. But anyway, he called me the Jackie Robinson of the Secret Service. And that really let me know that the president expected a lot of me, and I expected to do my duty there in the Secret Service. Yes, that was really a great day for me to compare me with Jackie Robinson. This indicated to me that the president knew that I would have to withstand quite a bit of things that maybe I would like, but I would have to adjust to. And as I say it in my book, I was not very well welcomed by some of the agents in the Secret Service. As a matter of fact, I had one assistant supervisor there. He was a supervisor when the normal supervisor was off duty, and we were in Hyannisport. And he was somewhat, I guess, envious of the attention that the president was showing to me in Hyannisport. And when we got back to the little cabin where we were living, where my shift was living, he told me in uncertain terms, he looked me right in the eye, and as I point out in my book, he says, Bolden, he says, I want to tell you something, and I don't want you to ever forget it. Now, are we allowed to say the N-word on your show?
Well, yeah, anything you want to say, I'm happy to listen to you.
Well, he looked me right in the eye, and he was drinking a beer. And as a matter of fact, he was working on his fourth beer. He looked me right in the eye, and he says, Bolden, I want to tell you something, and don't you ever forget it. He said, you're a nigger. You were born a nigger, and when you die, you'll still be nothing but a nigger. So act like one. Now, this was assistant supervisor of the United States Secret Service. You can imagine how shocked I was to hear somebody come out with such an overt racist remark. So I had to search my mind as to how I was going to deal with this, because this was a supervisor. And I didn't want to aggravate this thing or send it to the next level, because the next level would have been necessarily violent, because I could see that he was ready for some violent activity. I just looked at him and told him, I love you too, Harvey. That was his name. And I turned around and walked out of the cabin. And I think that I made the right decision then, because if it had turned violent, it couldn't have been in my favor. But the main thing that concerned me, more or less even greater than the racism, was the lackadaisical attitude of the Secret Service agents who were surrounding President Kennedy. They were drinking, they were cabareting, some of them were carrying bottles of liquor in the little briefcases that we would carry around with us, that we normally would have a clean shirt in and a tie and a change of clothes in case that the president took off all of a sudden, and we didn't have a chance to go back to the hotel or to the room. We carried a little auxiliary clothing but some had liquor in those bags, and I witnessed them drinking them on duty. And this to me was, this couldn't be tolerated. So I just couldn't seem to digest anything like that. So when I came back to Washington, D.C. on July the 5th, I went to the chief of the Secret Service, U.E. Bauman, then, and I told him under no uncertain terms, I said, Chief, that if any attempt was made on the president, is to be made on President Kennedy's life, it's going to be successful. So because the agents are not going to be prepared to react. And he asked me why, and I told him there's too much drinking of alcohol. The agents' reflexes are going to be numb. They're not going to be able to react. And sure enough, this Dallas, Texas thing that happened on November the 22nd, this murder by President, affable man, President John F. Kennedy, which I never will forget. It really was a shock to me, and it hurt me very deeply. I got the impression that I had failed some way because I had complained. I had done everything that I could do in order to bring and highlight this negligence of the Secret Service to every official in the Secret Service that I talked to. I talked to inspectors. I talked to the agents in charge in the Chicago office, and all of them blew me off as this is a figment of my imagination. And then there was these conspiracies that were going on in 1963 that prefaced the actual assassination of President John F. Kennedy. There were some serious conspiracies. These conspiracies were organized. They were by different foreigners. We had a Cuban faction who was organized to kill the President of the United States here in Chicago, Illinois. His name was C.O.W.S, since I bring that out also in my book. And he made the statement that the president was about to be taken care of, President John Kennedy. Now, he made this statement in October of 1963. This is when he made the statement, according to the person who was investigating the case, Agent Joe Noonan. But the Secret Service didn't pass this information on to Dallas. And sure enough, November 22nd, the president was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Now, this Cuban, C.O.W.S, now he knew that the president was about to be taken care of. Now, how would he know that unless he had some type of inside information? Now, the Secret Service also knew this. They also knew about a Miami conspiracy involving another person named Miltier, who was alleged to have been involved in the bombing of the 4 black girls down in the Alabama church. So now they were discussing on the telephone, which was tapped by the FBI and the sheriff's office in Miami County, who made a tap of the telephone call between Miltier and another person, and they were discussing. They said, what's the best way to kill President Kennedy? Now, these are people who wanted to assassinate the president. They said the best way to kill President Kennedy is from a tall building with a high-powered rifle. And that's exactly the way that President Kennedy was killed, you see. And so now...
Yeah, he even discussed having a patsy, having someone there ready to be blamed.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And that's the way I look at it. Now, I tell you, I just couldn't stomach this because my stomach was turning after the president was killed, and I said, somebody need to do something about this, because I saw the Secret Service redictating reports in Chicago, and they were changing dates, and they were tying knots into the investigation that the Warren Commission was about to make. And when I said tying knots, I mean they were falsifying documents, and they were collecting investigations that had already been made in Chicago, and they were sealing those files. And we were called into the meetings in the office and told that these investigations never existed, the Chicago investigations. And sure enough, these investigations at that time were not being discussed to the Warren Commission, who had been empowered with investigating the assassination of the President of the United States. Well, I took it upon myself. I said, well, I'll do something about this, because the American citizens need to know. They need to know the truth about what happened to their president and the steps that the Secret Service was taking in order to obfuscate the exact thing that happened to President Kennedy.
You hear Mr. Bolden talking about obfuscation? Come on. Katherine, Massey, book club, context of white supremacy, the worthless Negro from Virginia. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information for non-white people on the global system of white supremacy racism, what it is, how it works. Today's date, Friday, April 11, 2025. So I have been told the great Roy Ayers just passed away. That's right. Anyway, the great Abraham Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza. This is our fourth installment. Finally, we were able to hear directly from Mr. Bolden today, kind of picking up or giving a short summary of most of what we have heard in the book thus far. When we left off last week, they sent perhaps a black informant to set up Mr. Bolden, like, hey, Abraham, give me a gun, and I'm going to go deal with these folks who tried to get you in trouble like this, man. Bolden said, what, man, if you don't get out of here? And that's how we kind of left things. We'll have to see how it goes from there. But that segment, that is a 2008 interview that Abraham Bolden was given. And I was even thinking, like, wow, that is the year that President Obama was elected. Now, I guess in one sense, you can say, wow, that is progress. And then Obama did get a historic number of death threats, so, progress, yeah. Anyway, speaking of progress, he said, Mr. Bolden, that he was surprised about the racism that he encountered as he was matriculating through his law enforcement career and up at Secret Service, and we talked about that in the book, and he had the exact number of racists that he met, and we said we think that number is probably low, but whatever. And that is us generally, even now, 2025, being surprised about racism that we encounter on the job. The racism from the Secret Service agents, and specifically their racism directed at President Kennedy. Now, he said that Kennedy was called a negro lover. Now, that's name calling. We include that, all that. I hesitate about calling Kennedy a negro lover because that suggests John Kennedy, not all white people is racist, and that's how a lot of black people thought and think about John Kennedy. That's not my view. My view is that sometimes one racist white person will have a disagreement with another racist white person about how we run our niggers. John F. Kennedy and his brother, I do not think these are good, non-racist white people, whatever that means. COINTELPRO, they authorized a lot of what was happening with the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, against people like Dr. King, Malcolm X, on and on and on and on and on. They were authorizing even assassination attempts against Fidel Castro, so I don't want to hear about that. Oh, this is not racist, good white. But there were a lot of white people who did not agree with the method that John Kennedy wanted to practice racism, like sending niggers like Abraham Bolden to language school in Chicago. They don't agree with that. We don't want to do that. We don't want to educate them. We don't want no refinement. We just nigger, and, all that. They're not even supposed to be in the Secret Service and none of that. Get out of here, Bolden. Be a nigger. That's what they told him. He said he was surprised about that, but I think that is important because if you have a lot of white people who are responsible for your protection and they don't agree with your method of practicing racism, oh, my Lord. all that laxity and the security and all of this, whether they know what's going to happen or not, woo, you complicit one way or another. This sounds like it might be you do know. And we wanted to get rid of that nigga lover anyway. And speaking, and then before I get excited, he said he got all this racism from these white people who thought Kennedy was a Negro lover, and then they name called Kennedy, they name called me, so I was the butt of a lot of jokes. Man, I so wish Lynn had hopped in, interrupt one time. Brother Bolden, what names did they call you? I know it's painful and all that, but again, now, hey, the story we talking about now, they did put Brother Kennedy's brains out in the street, so it can't be worse than that. What jokes did they tell? Like, how many can you remember? What kind of name? Did they have a pet name, so-called, that they just every day, instead of Abraham, this is what we call you every day? Man, I wish we had got that, or you put it in the book. Maybe you did. He said they were envious. The racist white people on the job, they were envious of him because Kennedy, he was getting this attention. He called them up and wanted to send me to language school, introducing me to his brother and all these other powerful white people. Who is this nigger? You're supposed to be picking cotton. You're supposed to be in a rat slum in Chicago. Who is this nigger Bolden? Mad. They might have, the real talk, they probably started plotting. Then we are going to get this nigger. We gonna get this nigger. We gonna get Fred, because you got the same people. I just mentioned COINTELPRO. Ed Hanrahan, I said I was stunned. He's involved in this case and the assassination of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. That raid was planned in advance. This attack on Mr. Bolden probably was too. And I said last week, that gun episode, they were probably trying to kill Abraham Bolden. Chicago, Roy Ayers. When he says that they didn't pass that information to the Dallas agents, that's what I mean about this. And there's so much of that. And even, in fact, that right there, he says not passing that agent to the Dallas agents and even restricting that information from the greater public, that there were a lot of assassination attempts against John F. Kennedy leading up to Dallas, so that people don't know about this, and botching so-called the surveillance and all the rest of it. All of that is so important. And even the fact he said that they have recordings of people talking about there's going to be an assassination attempt on John F. Kennedy, precise, Dallas, high skyscraper building. Someone will be on one of the high floors, high power rifle. They'll get lost. There'll be a patsy. I have heard some of that recording, which is wild. They have a documentary from, it's an overseas documentary from some years ago, but they had that. It is Joseph Miltier is the white man that he is talking about. And this is another. Now, what's the key to all of this? Racist. They said, oh, my Lord, this is an extreme Georgia cracker racist. They said, that's how they describe it. But they got recording of this dude allegedly talking way in advance. Well, I won't say way, but yeah, if it was a day before, a week before, whatever. It's before the assassination happened, and he is talking with great detail about how this is going to be done. And they're not going to be looking in these upper floors for anyone with a rifle, and you just have one person who gets there, and the folks get away in the confusion and blah, blah, blah. And that's not the only one in terms of advanced knowledge about this and all of these attacks. And, oh, well, you got all these racist white people in positions that should be able to do something about it, and they botch it. They don't do nothing. And even say, I wouldn't do nothing to protect that nigger lover. I don't think that is the common way that people talk about this assassination is the product of white supremacy racism. Racist white people carried out this assassination. That is not common at all, even though, in fact, that's one of the main points of Executive Action, the movie. That's why Dr. Cambon told me to watch it. That's one of the movies that disappeared. You could not see that film for about 25 years. It is on YouTube now, but for about 25 years, you could not see that film or The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Both about the same thing, right? Let's see. The tying knots. I'm so glad. Abraham Bolden, my black brother, is still with us. He said the Secret Service was tying knots into the investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy. And he said By tying knots, I mean falsifying documents. My black brother, that's why we don't do no metaphors. Tying knots? What the hell? Falsifying documents. This is not a child and I'm confused, tying my shoe, I messed it up. No, man, no. This is criminal activity. Might be treason if this is criminal activity that is a part of a conspiracy to assassinate the President of the United States. Sounding like really them January 6ers. That's what we're talking about. That ain't tying knots at all. And even that, last week and I raised that point about, hey, we can't play white people cheap. These are master deceivers. That's some of it right there. Destroying documents, falsifying documents, changing dates so that you don't even know what are you talking about. No. It's right here. This happened on November 13th. Wink, wink. And we got an official seal on it and everything. That's what I mean. Even when Mr. Bo is in the book, he said they got Secret Service credentials. That is master deceiver. Can you get authentic, even a good fake of a Secret Service credential that would fool a white person, fool a white police officer? Can't play them cheap, man. They are the masters of obfuscation. Get into it. Context of white supremacy, Katherine Massey Book Club, The Echo from Dealey Plaza. Audio segment 1.
What you gonna do in Chicago? Now, what you gonna do in Chicago? What you gonna do in Chicago? What you gonna do in Chicago? What you gonna do in Chicago?
Chapter 10. On the morning of May 28th, Barbara and I got our 2 older children ready for school, picked up the sitter to look after our youngest, Darren, and drove downtown, where we had arranged to meet George Howard in front of a restaurant. The 3 of us continued on to the courthouse together. George stopped as we were about to climb the courthouse steps and warned me again not to say anything to anyone in sight about the case. "Let me do the talking and you keep quiet," he admonished. Inside the building, reporters and cameramen crowded together in the large rotunda. Their harsh floodlights and persisting questions assaulted us as we made our way through to the elevators. George fielded a few of their queries, but stopped anyone who addressed any questions directly to me with a curt, "My client has no statement to make concerning this case at this time." Upstairs, Secret Service agents lurked by the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. George led us into Judge J. Sam Perry's court, past the cold and silent stares of Martineau, Jordan, Turina, and another agent named Louis Sims. The friendlier faces of friends and acquaintances who had come to show their support greeted me inside the courtroom. The judge opened the proceedings, which turned out to be brief and rather anticlimactic, given the tense drama of the moment. He asked if we wished to enter a plea. "The defendant enters a plea of not guilty, Your Honor," George Howard said clearly and confidently. Judge Perry set a date of June 12th to hear preliminary motions in the case, and we were done. On June 12th, the court heard Howard's motions. The judge denied our motion for a list of witnesses who were to appear in the trial. He did grant a motion for a list of witnesses to any oral statements made by the defendant, and another for a copy of questions put to the defendant and the results thereof during the polygraph test that was administered by Agent Jordan. Judge Perry announced that the trial would begin in his court on July 6th. When that day came, we took our places at the long wooden defendant's table that stood to one side of the judge's bench. Across from us, at the prosecution table, sat U.S. Attorneys Richard T. Sykes and Arthur Dunn. The courtroom doors swung open, and a U.S. Marshal led in a group of what seemed like 200 or so prospective jurors. The judge explained the rules that would govern the voir dire, the jury selection process, and the lawyers began questioning the potential jurors one by one. Each side made a few peremptory challenges, and the judge excused some jurors himself for various reasons. Before I knew it, The clerk was swearing in 12 jurors and 4 alternates. I couldn't help but notice that the only non-white faces on the jury belonged to 1 Negro and 1 Mexican. Making it clear that he wanted to move the trial along as speedily as possible, Judge Perry asked the attorneys on both sides if they were prepared to go right into their opening statements. No official transcript of the opening statement made by the government that day can be found. Neither do the official transcripts that do exist specifically identify the government attorney who made the opening statement on behalf of the government. According to defense attorney Howard's own opening statement, the government's opening statement was made by Richard Sykes. Sykes would have necessarily sought to convince the jury that the government was prepared to prove its charges against the defendant as outlined in the indictment by the grand jury on May 21, 1964. The indictment was of 3 counts charging that the defendant, Abraham W. Bolden, being a public official, a United States Secret Service agent of the Treasury Department, did directly and indirectly corruptly ask, demand, exact, solicit, seek, and agree to receive a thing of value for himself, the sum of $50,000 in return for being influenced in his performance of an official act by disclosing matter and matters in violation of Section 201, Title 18, United States Code. The defendant did corruptly influence, obstruct, and impede, and endeavor to influence, obstruct, and impede the due administration of justice in the prosecution of Case Number 64, CR 300, entitled United States v. DiEugenio et al., in violation of Section 1503, Title 18, United States Code. And the defendant did unlawfully, willingly, and knowingly conspire, confederate, and agree with Frank Jones, named as co-conspirator, but not as a defendant herein, to commit offense against the United States government in violation of Section 1503, Title 18, United States Code. The overt acts alleged were that Bolden met Frank Jones on May 11, 1964, and gave Jones a piece of paper. On or about May 12, 1964, Jones went to 5301 West Quincy Street, Chicago, Illinois. On or about May 12, 1964, Jones went to 5301 West Quincy Street, Chicago, Illinois. On May 12, 1964, Bolden had a telephone conversation with Frank Jones, and on or about May 13, 1964, Bolden had a conversation with Frank Jones in violation of Section 371, Title 18, United States Code. When the government finished its opening statement, it was George Howard's turn to pace in front of the jury. In a clear voice he told jurors that Defendant Abraham Bolden is not guilty of any crime against the United States. We will show that Bolden's meetings with Frank Jones were in furtherance of an investigation that was ongoing. My client did not give Jones any excerpt from a government file or ask Frank Jones to solicit a sum of money from Joseph Spagnoli. Howard closed by casting doubt on the men at the heart of the government's case. We intend to show by evidence from the stand that Joseph Spagnoli has boasted of the number of times he has been arrested and never been convicted. We intend to show, not by speculation, but by evidence, that these 2 men who are going to testify for the government are making a daring attempt to corrupt the United States government to save their own hides. After the opening statements, Judge Perry called for a short recess before the government began presenting its case. George Howard and I walked out of the courtroom and stood with Barbara by the railing overlooking the rotunda. I'm going to give it my best shot, George told her. We're up against it. They're going to try everything to convict your husband, and I'm going to try everything to see that he is found not guilty of these charges. Acting Special Agent in Charge Martineau was called as the government's first witness. Maurice Martineau commanded everyone's attention as he strode to the front of the courtroom, his silver-white hair shining and his steely blue eyes darting behind horn-rimmed glasses. He neatly fit the image of the serious and responsible senior government agent, a man who knew his job and did it well. I knew that the jury would buy his act, but of course This was the same man who had taunted me on so many occasions, who sent me on pointless errands to buy black Muslim newspapers just so he could yell at me when I objected, and who had thought the news found hanging over my desk was no big deal. Richard Sykes elicited the information he wanted from his witness. Martineau said that Spagnoli, arrested on May 9th and under indictment, had phoned on May 13th. Spagnoli told me that he had been approached in his home by a total stranger who was a colored guy calling himself Mr. Q. He told me that Mr. Q told him that he had a connection in the Secret Service and that Spagnoli could buy the file in his bond case for the price of $50,000. Spagnoli said that this Mr. Q told him that the Secret Service was going to have Sandra's hair dyed on the 12th of May. Martineau described how he had told Agent Russell about the call from Spagnoli. During Mr. Martineau's testimony, I recalled that in several meetings at the Secret Service office, Russell informed us that in mid-April of 1964, Sandra Hafford was arrested by the Chicago police when she and a man named Vito Saccagnini attempted to cash a series of counterfeit bonds at a bank in Chicago. The fraud was discovered when one of the cashiers in the bank noticed that another cashier was cashing another series of bonds bearing the identical name of the bond payee. On May 7th, Sandra Hafford came to the Secret Service office and was interviewed by Agent John Russell. Sandra had a close relationship with Spagnoli and testified on behalf of the government on May 8th before the grand jury in the D'Antonio et al. Bond case. Spagnoli was a defendant in that case. After testifying, she was placed in protective custody in the Conrad Hilton Hotel under the name of Mrs. J. Lloyd Stocks. While in protective custody, Sandra decided to change the color of her hair. I do not know the reason that Sandra wanted to dye her hair and was only peripherally involved in the D'Antonio bond case. It was alleged by the government that I schemed with Jones to give Spagnoli information about Sandra that would aid and abet her intimidation or murder. Bolden was sent away to Secret Service School on the 17th of May. Martineau continued. On May 18th, I saw Bolden in the United States Attorney's Office at about 6:30 p.m. Present were Inspector McCann, Chief Inspector Turena, and the United States Attorney Edward V. Hanrahan. At that time, I told Bolden that I had received information from Spagnoli that Spagnoli had been approached by Frank Jones, who offered to sell him the Spagnoli Secret Service bond file for $50,000. I told Bolden that Spagnoli said Jones had given Spagnoli an excerpt from the file. I further told Bolden that it was Jones who was arrested and said that it was Bolden who had asked him to approach Spagnoli for the purpose of selling the Spagnoli file. At that point, I was interrupted by Bolden, who proclaimed that if we thought it was he who gave the excerpt to Jones, that he had a typewriter at home and that we were free to examine it and compare it to the excerpt. I hadn't mentioned that the excerpt was typewritten. The anger surged up inside me. "That's a lie," I hissed in George Howard's ear. "I never said that." I knew Judge Perry was watching me whispering my outrage to my lawyer, but I didn't care. "Nothing of the sort happened, George. I believe Marty set this whole thing up." Judge Perry banged his gavel down hard and glared at me, and the jury followed his gaze. I'm sure everyone in the room knew that I believed that Martineau was lying. Martineau kept going, unfazed. Bolden told me that if he wanted to make a proposition of that kind to Spagnoli, that he would not have used Frank W. Jones, that he had many clever informants who could much more ably represent Mr. Bolden. I reviewed the daily reports of Agent Bolden for the days May 12th and May 13th, and none of the reports reflect that Bolden was having contact with Frank Jones. Sykes had no more questions. On cross-examination, George got Martineau to admit that he had helped arrange the elaborate ruse to bring me back from Secret Service school in Washington, but Martineau denied that he knew that I was the arresting officer in the Jones case. For that matter, he denied any knowledge at all of an official relationship between me and Jones. Are you denying that you have any knowledge of Bolden's contact with an investigation of Frank Jones? Martineau insisted that he had no knowledge of the Jones investigation or of my involvement with it. George Howard turned his back on the witness box and walked back to the defense table, yanking his chair out in disgust. He was hog-tied. The judge and the prosecutors managed to slam shut every potential opening George could find. They would not let him mount a defense. Things didn't look good at all. The government next called Frank Jones to the stand, and 2 Secret Service agents escorted him into the courtroom. Jones was a large man with very dark skin, and he looked uncomfortable in the neat suit and tie as he entered the room. Jones did not meet my gaze. Under direct examination, Jones readily outlined his checkered past, admitting that he had been convicted of felony larceny in 1949 and convicted again, this time for writing bad checks in 1954. Abraham Bolden arrested me in 1962 on a charge of possession and passing of counterfeit money. I was indicted on that charge, and while still under indictment, Agent Bolden arrested me again in 1963 on a charge of manufacturing counterfeit money, he testified. Those cases are still pending against me. Jones next said that he was at home with his wife when Bolden drove up in his car and parked across the street. I walked over to Bolden's car, got in, and Bolden told me that he had arrested Spagnoli for counterfeiting and that a great deal of money had been made by defendants in that case. Bolden said that Spagnoli wanted to know the whereabouts of a certain girl named Sandy. Bolden also had information about a prisoner who had been brought to Chicago on a writ and was going to testify against Spagnoli. Bolden said that this prisoner was at the Cook County Jail. I could see some of the jurors looking curiously back and forth between Jones and me as he told his story. Bolden told me that he had a Secret Service file on the Spagnoli counterfeiting case and on the testimony of the witnesses. Bolden said that the file would be valuable to Spagnoli and that he would sell the file for $50,000. And what happened next? Dunn prodded. You can't make a living as a con man and swindler, as Jones had done all his life, if you don't have a way of gaining people's trust. I could sense that the judge and some of the jurors were accepting Jones's story as absolute fact. Bolden told me that he wanted me to take a portion of the file to Spagnoli to prove that the rest of the file could be produced. He told me to give Spagnoli the information about Sandy and this prisoner in the county jail. Bolden said that Sandy was in a downtown hotel under the name of Stocks. Bolden then showed me some onion skin paper stapled together and another small piece of paper which was a portion of the same file which he handed to me. He took his typewritten piece of paper out of his briefcase and handed it to me. Dunn walked over to the witness stand with the document in his hand. I now show you Government's Exhibit 6 for identification, he said, handing Jones a sloppily typed document alleged to be an excerpt from the summary report I was accused of trying to sell. It has been ascertained that Spagnoli asked Vito Nitti, in presence of Zaccanini, if he wanted to use a Greek name on some bonds, and Vito Nitti said yes. Spagnoli said he would have Nicky, identified as Pantos, go with him. The next day at Spagnoli's house, Joe Spagnetti told Zaccanini that Nitti wanted to take his restaurant partner along. Spagnoli said he would make up identification for Vito Nitti and Harvey. Spagnoli gave $8,000 in bonds to Nitti, according to Zaccagnini. Is this the paper that Bolden gave to you while the two of you were together on May 11th, 1964? Yes, it is, answered Jones after glancing briefly at the document. Exhibit 6 was entered into evidence. Tell the jury what happened next. During a break in Jones's testimony, Attorney Sykes walked over to the defense table and laid the plastic-covered exhibit in front of Howard. My temper flared the instant I saw the document. I've never seen this piece of paper before in my life. What the hell are they trying to pull? They know damn well that I wouldn't give anyone some crap. Simmer down, Abraham, Howard warned. They can hear you. You've got to control yourself. "George, take a look at this paper," I insisted. How could anyone believe that I would type something like this and try to pass it off as coming from an official document? The Secret Service knows that I didn't type this crap. After the short recess, Jones continued to testify. Bolden wrote the address of Spagnoli on the back of a fishing magazine that was on the front seat of his car. Jones continued. The address was 5301 Quincy in Chicago. He went on to describe his visit to Spagnoli's house the next day. Spagnoli's mother answered the door. I told her that I needed to talk to Jones about the problem that he was having. A few minutes later, Spagnoli came out of the basement with 2 Caucasian men. I told Spagnoli that, for a price, I was prepared to bring the whole file that the Secret Service had against him. I told him that I knew the whereabouts of Sandy, but Spagnoli said that he had no interest in Sandy. I showed him the paper that Bolden had given me, and he asked me how much the file was going to cost. I told him that the man wanted $50,000. The government prosecutor, Dunn, kept drawing the story out of Frank Jones. I went into the kitchen with Spagnoli and the 2 other men, and we sat around the table drinking from a gin bottle and discussing other things. There was another young girl there who looked to be about 20 years old. Spagnoli told me that one of the men was Lou, and that Lou had a beef against him for transporting marijuana. Lou asked me if I could have this case taken care of also, and I told him that I would look into the matter. I gave Spagnoli my home telephone number and told him to ask for Mr. Q whenever he wanted to talk with me. And did you subsequently meet with the defendant Bolden and have a conversation with him? Dunn asked. Yes, I did, came the quick reply. When I left Spagnoli's house, I called Bolden and told him to meet me at Marquette Road and Halstead Street. Bolden met me there in about an hour, and we drove to a McDonald's restaurant on 71st and Vincennes. Bolden told me that Sandy was having her hair dyed at 3 p.m., and that she would probably call Spagnoli sometime during the evening. Bolden told me to tell Spagnoli not to curse so much during his conversations with Sandra. I went back to Spagnoli's house and told him about Sandy's hair and the other information that Bolden had given me. Jones added that he had called me at my home to tell me he had delivered the message to Spagnoli. Did you have another conversation with the defendant after May 12th? Yes, I did, said Jones. On the morning of May 13th, I got a telephone call from Mr. Bolden. My wife answered the telephone and told me that Bolden wanted to talk to me. Bolden said that Spag called the boss and told me not to talk to him again. You don't know nothing, Bolden said, and hung up the telephone. Jones was winding up his testimony. When I was arrested on May 18th by the Secret Service, I was getting into a green Secret Service car and noticed a magazine lying on the floor with the back cover missing. Dunn walked purposefully to the prosecution table and picked up a magazine, which he handed to Jones, who could then finish. This is the Phillips 66 fishing guide that I saw in Bolden's car on May 18th. He wrote the address of Joseph Spagnoli on the back of this book. Judge Perry again called for a short recess before cross-examination, adding, I want to finish with this witness today and move this trial along. None of the jurors looked me in the eye as they filed back into the courtroom after recess, but I did notice that one of them smiled at the prosecutor, Arthur Dunn. I took that as a bad omen. George Howard agreed that Jones had done well under direct examination, coming off as a credible, successful professional rather than the career criminal that he was. The dates and times of his meetings with you match almost perfectly with the times that you gave me when we discussed this case at my office, George said. The only difference is that Jones says that the meetings were about one thing, and you say that the meetings were about another. Of all the people to get to go up against you or try to bring you down, why do you think they would use someone like Jones? I'm not sure just how Jones came into the picture, I answered, a little annoyed by the question. All I know is that Jones ups and calls me at home on May 10th and said that he wanted to talk to me. In mid-April 1964, Jones called complaining about cameras and other printing equipment missing from his seized automobile. I investigated and found Jones's claims unfounded. I told him at that time that I was getting ready to go to Secret Service school and that I would try to get another agent to meet with him. As I told you at your office, Jones called Agent Stocks and told him that he wanted to talk to an agent about his case. When Stocks called me into his office, I refused to meet with Jones, and Stocks complained to Martineau. Just like I said, Marty called me into his office and reamed my ass out, saying that Jones was my case and that I had to meet with him or quit. That's the only reason that I met with Jones, and that's the truth. So, how do you explain Jones knowing all of those facts about Sandy and Spagnoli's address and all? Howard asked. Spagnoli's address was in the newspapers. Everything that Jones has testified to was well known by all of the agents in the Secret Service, including Agent Cross, who was the last one to have the report. I'm not saying that Jones didn't go to Spagnoli's house or that he didn't have something from the Secret Service that he either stole out of the Secret Service car when he was with me or got from another agent. All that I am telling you is that I never sent Jones to ask Spagnoli for anything, and that's the truth. As the cross-examination began, Jones recounted how he was arrested by the defendant in both 1962 and 1963. At any time before being arrested by the defendant, did you have conversations with him about assisting him in finding other members of the counterfeiting group? Howard asked. I discussed it with Agent Bolden in 1963. That is the only time I ever discussed the two persons you have made mention of, he said, referring to Horace Foster and Princess. Howard raised the question of Jones's obtaining money under false pretenses in a matter related to Alderman Chew. Jones was questioned concerning the allegation that Jones took money that had been collected for the 7th Ward and converted that money to his own use. Jones steadfastly denied, under oath, Howard's contentions. Jones also denied, under oath, that he had gone into a hardware store and opened an account in Alderman Chew's name. Howard resumed his questioning. Now, Mr. Jones, when the Secret Service arrested you, were you taken to the Secret Service office here in this building? Yes, I was. And did you give a statement to the Secret Service? Yes, I did. When you gave the statement to the Secret Service, you had in mind all the time framing Mr. Bolden, didn't you? Howard asked, staring hard at Frank Jones. Dunn was on his feet in an instant. Objection, Your Honor. I ask that the question be stricken. Objection sustained, the judge said, and at Dunn's request he addressed my attorney. That is not a proper question. Counsel is admonished not to follow that line of questioning again. It was clear that George Howard had no friends in that courtroom. Each time he poked a hole in Jones's testimony or that of any other government witness, the prosecutors would leap to their feet with objections, which were almost always sustained. They knew what they were doing, and set things up so that they were often protected by the letter of the law. Even when they weren't, they clearly had a sympathetic judge on the bench. When we tried to get Jones to testify about his call to me on May 10th and his request to see me concerning a man named Horace Foster, Judge Perry was quick to insert himself into the trial as a third prosecutor. Howard asked Jones if he knew Horace Foster. Jones had already answered that he did when the government objected. Judge Perry promptly excused the jury and snapped at George Howard. What has this got to do with the cross-examination? This is far beyond the scope of cross-examination. I don't see the relationship to going into this relationship in some other case. George explained to the court that he intended to show that the conversations between Frank Jones and me after May 11th were all connected to the commitments that Jones had made to me to help find other people who were being sought by the Secret Service. Mr. Jones testified that it was something about a file. I just want the ladies and gentlemen of the jury to hear both sides from this witness who is testifying. Prohibited by Judge Perry from pursuing the Horace Foster question any further, however, Howard had to let the witness go. Good man that he was, George wouldn't let himself get discouraged. but these constant setbacks were wearing him down. The government's entire case rested on Jones, and we were blocked from implicating him or from pointing out the many untruths in his story. As he stepped down from the witness stand, Frank Jones looked at me and smirked. At least one of the jurors clearly saw this and frowned. As the trial continued, the government called Myra Nason, a fingerprint examiner from a different branch of the Treasury Department. Nason testified that Frank Jones's fingerprints were definitely on a gin bottle, Exhibit 7, that had been introduced into evidence as proof of Jones's visit to the home of Spagnoli on May 11th. However, when questioned as to whether or not he had found any fingerprints on Exhibit 6, the alleged excerpt from the report, Nason first began his answer, "No, I didn't." Cutting his answer short, Nason quickly added that there were no latent fingerprints of any value on the exhibit, so he could not testify whether I had ever touched Exhibit 6. During the cross-examination, George Howard asked if the witness had found other fingerprints on the gin bottle. "Yes, I did. There were other fingerprint impressions there," Nason replied, shifting uncomfortably in the witness chair. "Did you ever check government's Exhibit number 7 for Abraham Bolden's fingerprints?" "No, sir, I did not," Nason replied candidly. During Nason's elaborate testimony, which involved blown-up charts and fingerprint cards, there had been absolutely no finding that my fingerprints were found on any of the exhibits offered by the government. During the course of the trial, Howard raised a formal objection to Exhibits 6 and 7. These objections are made for the reason that there is no competent evidence to show that the accused, Abraham Bolden, ever associated himself in any way with any of these items that are now sought to be placed into evidence. We take the position it is corroborative, and of course apparently Mr. Howard completely overlooked the testimony of Jones. Dumbfounded, the judge brought a quick end to the debate. "Well, it is a question of fact for the jury to find, link by link. If the jury finds that Bolden was in no way associated with Frank Jones and Spagnoli, well, they will follow their own weight. But for what it's worth, the objection is to the weight and value and not to the admissibility, so therefore the objection is overruled, and those exhibits are submitted and all other exhibits tendered are submitted." Judge Perry's undermining of the defense case had grown almost comical. He had just told the jury, for all intents and purposes, that unless they found that there was no connection of any kind between Frank Jones and myself, they could consider me as a possible source of the evidence. It didn't matter if the connection was part of some criminal conspiracy or if it was completely legitimate. I'd just have to get up there and tell my side of the story, my word against his. If I hadn't known how my forefathers had confronted so many cruel and corrupt men hiding behind the badges and black robes of the law, I might have been surprised. Having lost yet one more battle, Howard returned quietly to his chair, while Richard Sykes called his next witness, Jean Carpenter Jones. The most damaging of the circumstantial witnesses, she was the common-law wife of Frank Jones. She testified that on May 11th she had received a call from a person identifying himself as Agent Bolden. She said that the man had said he wanted to talk to Frank Jones, but that Jones was not home at the time. She went on to testify that the man had left a message that he wanted to talk to Jones and would come by the house on the morning of May 12th. She said that on May 12th she was home when Agent Bolden came by the house and asked if Frank Jones was at home. She told the jury that on May 13th she received a telephone call in which I heard Bolden say that Frank should forget about everything and that they had called the boss and that Frank shouldn't talk to anybody. She went on to say, later during the week, I received calls from a person asking to speak to Mr. Q. I took his telephone number and wrote it down on a piece of paper near the telephone. Howard's cross-examination of Jean Carpenter Jones was uneventful. He began by questioning her about her behavior during the April 8, 1963 raid on their house in which Frank Jones was arrested. Despite vigorous objections from the government prosecutors and the judge's opinion that such conduct by the witness was irrelevant, Howard got her to admit that during the raid she had rushed about the house, grabbed several sheets of counterfeit notes, and concealed them in her bosom until she was threatened with immediate jailing. Her attempt to conceal evidence had been presented to the U.S. Attorney at that time. However, he'd declined to prosecute her. The next witness the government called was Joseph Spagnoli. Unlike Frank Jones, who had cleaned himself up for his appearance in court, Spagnoli wore an open-collared shirt and casual slacks, his black hair long. Under questioning by Richard Sykes, Spagnoli testified that he had been arrested by the Secret Service on May 9, 1964, and taken to the service's office in Chicago, where he had a conversation with me. I asked Bolden if Secret Service agents were like regular police. He said that when he'd asked me if agents took money, I told him that, out of 14,000 men, I imagine that some do. Attorney Sykes then led Spagnoli through his testimony as to what occurred at his home on May 12, 1964. Spagnoli described how he was at his home when a colored man came to my door and introduced himself as Mr. Q. He went on. Mr. Q said that he wanted to talk to me about my case, and he had some information that I would be interested in. I let him into the house, and we went into the kitchen and sat around the table and had a few drinks of gin from a bottle. After he was there for a short while, Mr. Q showed me a slip of paper and said that it was a paragraph from my file that was in the Secret Service office. He told me that he wanted $50,000 for the whole file. Spagnoli appeared relaxed and unworried. Later in the day, Mr. Q came back to my house, and we rode around in the neighborhood. He said that Sandra was going to have her hair dyed at 3 p.m. If I wanted to kill her, I would have to get her quick. Mr. Q said that he could get hold of a badge to be used if I needed it. Mr. Q gave me his telephone number and told me to call him and say that Cousin Joe is sick in the hospital and he would call me back. Prompted by Sykes, Spagnoli identified the appropriate exhibits, including the gin bottle and the alleged excerpt from the Secret Service file. Sykes asked what Spagnoli did after Jones left his house, all the while studying the jury for reactions to the testimony. On May 13th, the next day, I called Mr. Martineau and told him that I had been offered my file from the Secret Service office for $50,000. The next day, May 14th, I met Mr. Martineau in the parking lot of a supermarket and gave him the gin bottle and the slip of paper that Jones had given to me. On May 15th, the Secret Service showed me some pictures while we were seated in the parking lot, and I picked out a man named Frank Jones as being the colored man who came to my house and tried to sell the excerpt. Later that day, I called the number that Jones had given me and asked for Mr. Q. The woman said that she didn't know anyone by the name of Mr. Q. I told her that if she saw him, to tell him that Cousin Joe was sick in the hospital. Done with his questioning, Sykes calmly sat down at the prosecution table, giving George Howard his turn with Spagnoli. George began by making sure the jury heard Spagnoli say that he hadn't been regularly employed in at least 15 years, and at the present time his mother was supporting him and his 2 children. Now, Mr. Spagnoli, Howard said, you say that you are indicted under case docketed as 64 CR 300, entitled United States v. D'Antonio and others. Now I ask you if the government or the Secret Service made any promises of immunity of any type for your testifying here. No, because I didn't do any of those things. That's why. I don't need nothing. I didn't conspire with nobody. I don't have to have a deal, Spagnoli answered, becoming emotional and glancing quickly at the government attorneys. Nobody promised you any assistance in your indictment? I don't need any assistance. I'm innocent of the charges, he said, waving his arms a bit wildly. That is not the question, Mr. Spagnoli. I am asking you if someone promised you something. Let his answer stand, the judge interrupted impatiently. You have the answer. Let us just go on. The judge then addressed the jury. He is not on trial, ladies and gentlemen, in that case here. That is a mere charge as far as you folks are concerned. The answer is there, and it may stand. Now proceed. And while you were talking with this man in the Secret Service office, did he at any time offer to sell to you government materials for $50,000? No, Spagnoli answered restlessly. Did he offer at any time to place in your possession any files relative to your case? No. Did he tell you at that time that he was going to have somebody get in touch with you about your case? Howard continued. No. Did this man, Mr. Q, ever tell you that Abraham Bolden was the man that sent him to you? No, Spagnoli answered. Now, when you say Mr. Q told you that this lady Sandy Hafford was going to be moved, that if you wanted to get her, you could get her, did Mr. Q say where they were going to move her to? No. The only thing that this man, Mr. Q, said about Sandy was that they are going to dye her hair and move her at 3 o'clock. Is that right? Howard asked, pacing before the jury. Spagnoli was clearly agitated and uncomfortable. He said they were going to dye her hair at 3 o'clock and move her at 9 o'clock that night, and if I wanted to get her, I would need a badge because the one she'll let in is a Secret Service agent or an FBI agent, and I said, I don't want her, I'm not interested. Mr. Spagnoli, when these pictures were shown of this man, Mr. Q, when you identified him, did you have any trouble identifying him? Objection, Your Honor, Sykes broke in. While this was taking place, Dunn was muttering something about the killing of Sandra. Throughout the trial, he had been making comments favorable to the government and damaging to the defense, within earshot of the jury, but not for official transcription. May it please the court, Howard responded, remaining calm but clearly irritated. If Mr. Dunn wants to make statements, I ask that he address them to this court instead of mumbling to the jury. This time Judge Perry agreed with Howard and both overruled the objection and cautioned Dunn to address his statements to the court. But we had no chance to turn this small success to any advantage. George continued his tough cross-examination, but Spagnoli stood by his story. Making matters worse, Spagnoli seemed to grow more confident, and so more flippant as his testimony continued, as if he felt the judge and government attorneys were squarely in his corner. I wondered if his arrogant, disrespectful behavior toward my attorney might possibly work against the government's case. One of the jurors studied Spagnoli intently as Howard attempted to pin the witness down on a part of his testimony in relation to telephone calls that he had made to Frank Jones. Mr. Spagnoli, do you remember having called this man, Mr. Q, on the morning of May 15, 1964? Howard asked, referring to Jones. I never talked to him at first, Spagnoli answered curtly. You did not call the number at 10 o'clock in the morning on May 15th? I don't remember the dates, answered Spagnoli impatiently. When you come with them dates, I don't remember the dates. All I know is that I called the number. In the afternoon? Howard pressed. Spagnoli was clearly irritated by Howard's persistence and exploded. Regardless, morning or afternoon, I talked to a woman over there. That's all I know, Spagnoli answered in a raised voice. In the end, George got nowhere with Spagnoli and wrapped up his questioning. During a brief recess, Howard and I stood outside the courtroom quietly discussing the testimony of Spagnoli when he heard the elevator open behind us and turned to see Agent John Russell get off, with Maurice Martineau right behind him. I pointed Russell out as they walked past and said that I supposed he was going to be the government's next witness. Russell did not appear to be happy about what he was there to do. He looked down as he passed, but I could see the sadness in his face, and recalled how he had broken down in tears at the jail on the night of my arrest. Now he was about to take the stand against me. Indeed, Sykes called Russell as the next government witness. Russell said that on April 28, 1964, he had prepared a summary report on the Joseph Spagnoli counterfeit bond case. He said that prior to Spagnoli's arrest, he gave an onion-skin copy of the report to Agent Bolden, which I identified for Agents Bolden and Cross. On May 7th, he continued, I met a girl named Sandra Hafford in my office. Sandra had a close relationship with Spagnoli and testified on May 8th before the grand jury in the D'Antonio et al. Bond case. Spagnoli is a defendant in that case. Russell told the jury that at an office meeting on May 8th, Bolden was assigned to arrest a man named Arthur Rachel. The arrest was to take place on May 9th. The arrests of Joseph Spagnoli and Arthur Rachel actually took place on the morning of May 9th. On May 11th, Russell explained, he went to the Conrad Hilton Hotel where Sandra Hafford was being concealed, asked her to phone Spagnoli, and taped their conversation. Spagnoli used vile language and lots of curse words during the conversation. Sandra told me that she wanted to have her hair dyed red. Agent Noonan was to make the arrangements with a beautician to have Sandra's hair dyed the next day. Russell had played the tapes for all the agents in the Chicago office the next day, and we discussed whether we thought Spagnoli would harm the woman if he could. Abraham Bolden spoke up in agreement with me that if given a chance, Spagnoli would probably try to kill Sandra. Russell asserted, adding that, after the meeting, I radioed Agent Noonan and told him to tell Sandra that I would be at the Conrad Hilton Hotel with the beautician at 3 p.m. On May 13th, Special Agent in Charge Mr. Martineau called me into his office and told me that he had received a call from Joseph Spagnoli. I left the office and went to the office of Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Sykes and told him that Spagnoli had called the office. Bolden was nearby when I told Attorney Sykes of the telephone call. Next, after determining that 7 copies of the summary report had been distributed among the agents, Sykes asked, "Now, Mr. Russell, which copy is missing?" "A copy which I identified for Agents Bolden and Cross," Russell answered. The prosecutor picked up 2 pieces of paper from his table and handed them to Agent Russell. "I ask you to compare Government's Exhibit 6-A with Government's Exhibit 6 for identification. Have you examined them, Mr. Russell? Are they the same?" With the exception of the introductory words and some misspellings, this is an exact excerpt from the 15th page of the summary report, Russell answered quietly. Later, during Russell's testimony, Howard and I examined the 2 exhibits together and confirmed that the wording was almost the same as what was contained in the summary report. Later, Zagagnini stated that Spagnoli asked Vito Nitti, in presence of Zagagnini, if he wanted to use a Greek name on some bonds, and Vito Nitti said yes. Spagnoli said he would have Mikey, identified as Pantius, go with him. The next day, at Spagnoli's house, Joe Spagnoli told Zagagnini that Nitti wanted to take his restaurant partner along. Spagnoli said he would make up identification for Vito Nitti, and Harry Spagnoli gave $8,000 in bonds to Nitti, according to Zagagnini. "Your witness, counsel," said the prosecutor.
The real problem is this, James. 2 decades, there will be 7 billion human beings on this planet. Most of them brown, yellow, or black. All of them hungry. All of them determined to love. They'll swarm out of their breeding grounds into Europe and North America. Hence Vietnam. An all-out effort there will give us control of South Asia for decades to come. And with proper planning, we can reduce the population to 550 million by the end of the century. I know. I've seen the data.
We sound rather like gods reading the Doomsday Book, don't we?
Well, someone has to do it. Not only will the nations affected be better off, but the techniques developed there can be used to reduce our own excess population. Blacks, Puerto Ricans, Mexican Americans, poverty-prone whites, and so forth.
Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast. Finished up our first segment. We got a little snippet from Executive Action. Right there, I played that segment a few times. Had intended to play some other scenes from Executive Action last week, but they had the task force House committee, and that was brand new just days before the broadcast, so How could we not include that? Could have done the same thing this week, but I'd already made our audio segment, so we'll just have to include as we proceed. Now, number to dial if you have thoughts to share, 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email, untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. If you have thoughts, observations, feel free. You can read your commentary as we proceed, roughly close to halfway through the book. Or by the time we get done this week, we will be about halfway through the book, maybe a teaspoon more. We left off, we are in chapter 10, so we will resume the paragraph. During cross-examination, John Russell admitted that there was a rear entrance to the Secret Service office. That's what we'll pick up at when we resume. I can only say quickly, wow. There are many. Jonestown, oh my goodness, I forgot. Dr. King. So last week we broadcast on April 4, right? Dr. King assassination, 1968. I totally forgot when our current president, Donald Trump, when he said he was doing the records release, I was just focused on JFK because that's what they've been talking about, blah, blah, blah. But I totally neglected it was a total records dump on JFK's assassination, Robert Kennedy's assassination, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, and those records haven't even been a part of the release yet, unless I've been misinformed. And I'm talking about the Dr. King records specifically. Those are pending. Oh my. Now, we already had William Pepper as a guest on the program. We read Coretta Scott King's My Life, My Love, My Legacy, where she talks about this being a government conspiracy. They had the civil trial in 1998, where that was the conclusion that this was a conspiracy and that this was beyond James Earl Ray, and that there was government involvement in all of this. That's not public knowledge either, I guess, but oh man, there should be even more records. And again, all of this is connected. Anywho, the other quick thing before I nab some of our callers and emails and all that good stuff. Last week, Mr. Bolden, who we heard today, he mentioned some of the news reports about this case during that time, Newsweek, Chicago Tribune. I was able to find some of those reports. Amazing information. Really same pattern I observed with Jonestown, just looking at the newspaper and seeing other events that are being talked about at that time, so you can place these events in proper context. It is amazing. So I went to get those reports, and then greatest journalist ever, no contest, Mae Brussell, suspected racist. Wow. I totally forgot it. We did all that playing of Mae Brussell sound clips for Jonestown, zebra murders, just piles and piles and piles of her talking about all that in great detail. Again, Mae Brussell, she was in California. She predicted Jonestown a year and a half before it happened. I totally forgot Mae Brussell's radio program, and it seems like a lot of her independent research and journalism career started or was, and she's a Stanford graduate. But it seems like a lot of her research was rooted in her disbelief around the JFK assassination and what they were told. Her radio program, that is the very beginning, 1971, that's what she was talking about. The Warren Commission lied. I read the whole thing. These are my notes. These are books that I've written on, what happened with the assassination and blah, blah, blah. And man, I'm listening. I had to go back to the very, very beginning because I was just listening to Mae Brussell commentary around 74, 77, 78, and forward, where she's talking about Jonestown and other related matters. I had to go all the way back to the beginning because that is where she's talking about JFK and MLK and Robert Kennedy, and all these assassinations are the same, and the Black Panther Party, and just all of. She's in California, so of course Black Panther Party, Huey P. Newton, all of that. I'm listening randomly, about to go to bed no less, but listening randomly to old Mae Brussell. She's talking about JFK, hearing familiar names, blah, 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 all that. Man, if she doesn't bring up Abraham Bolden, I nearly fell out of the bed like, do what? And she, bam, walked right into it, the whole Chicago plot and blah, 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 and racist, blah, 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 blah. Mae flippin' Brussell. I would have played it this week, but one, I already had. I was like, now, we cannot keep bumping out Abraham Bolden to play white people, regardless of what they have to say. Bolden did write the book, so that was one. Two, I already had it written. Three, she was talking a little bit forward of where we are in the book. I think if we wait a week or two, right on point, and we can Mae Brussell again, which would again just further reinforce that all of these events, Dr. Welsing called it dot connecting, all of these events are related, and many of them, the same flipping people are involved, much less same agencies, CIA, FBI, whatever the case. But yes, so that would be all these events are related. That would be JFK assassination. They even mentioned the bombing of the Birmingham church, some of the people that were involved in that, in talking about the JFK assassination, which would just further entrench. Racists are doing all of this. Yes. But that would be JFK, Birmingham bombing, which was the same year, 63, Kennedy assassination, Dr. King assassination, Robert Kennedy assassination. Those two happened the same year, which was in the election year, 1968. Malcolm X's assassination, COINTELPRO in general, Jonestown, might even have to throw the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, because that was publicized in the middle of all of this, I believe 1974, that yes, all of this, same people are to blame, and not just white people or racists collectively. I mean, like, oh man, now you start to see like exact same names of specific white people that look like they would be probably involved in all of this. With more data to come, MLK files, cannot wait. Cannot wait. We might even have to get Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly back on the program for a fourth time. Did you get to look at the MLK files? What now? Let's see, folks. Oh, wait a minute. I got to do one more. So Mae Brussell, oh my goodness. Wow. Just wow. In fact, Mae Brussell, because she talked about so much, and she even brought up the Glass House tapes again. I just talked about that in LAPD, white supremacy, racism, and she brought that up again. I said, man, black people at minimum, the black people in California, they should know about and research Mae Brussell, because I mean, wow, she talked about racism in so much detail, particularly the local California system of white supremacy racism. My one report for today will nab our callers. Oh my goodness. I went to, because Mae Brussell, she did the same thing with Jonestown, so she is just dropping reports, newspaper articles, bang, bang, bang. And her theory seems to be the same that I said racists did this. Now, the languaging that will be used sometimes, they will say right wing, right wingers, right wing extremists. That's what they'll say. Fascists, that's another one that they'll say. Nazis. They have lots of different ways, but at the end, you mean racists did this? Yes. Got it. Now, she mentioned a number of different reports that are, wow, you saying racists killed John Kennedy? Because I don't normally hear people say that John Kennedy died as a result of racism, white supremacy. He's a nigger. They don't say none of that. That's not public. That's not common. None of that. They just say Oswald and keep on pushing. Now, because of Mae Brussell, I go to the library. I want a specific report. They don't have it. Well, they do have it. Retract. They do have it. They just made an error because this report is at the auxiliary library. So they have so much data at the campus libraries that they sometimes have it offsite and you have to wheel it back on campus. So they wheeled the incorrect book. Have to go back to get the correct book. As opposed to cursing, I said, oh man, there were multiple things that I needed that were at the library specifically that have yet to be digitized. One of them, the November 1963 Washington Post, very important magazine. This is the Fuller said he wrote to the Washington Post. I did slowly go through the editorials, and I was kind of hoping he was wrong and that they did publish his editorial, but I didn't see it. We miss you, Fuller. Now, the November 27, all of the Washington Post is fascinating from 22nd forward, but specifically from the 27th. So that's where he was assassinated on the 22nd. So that is 4 days removed from the assassination. Man. Or 5 days removed from the assassination, 27th. Man. There is a report titled, Some Dallas Students Cheered Friday's News. There are other interesting reports, and even some of them that confirm what I just said. What I just say? Racists killed Kennedy. Both, in fact, you could just do it plural. Racists killed the Kennedys. Plural. That's what I was getting the paper for. But anyway, while I'm in the paper and I'm flipping, I see some Dallas students cheered Friday's news. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. November 26, AP, that's Associated Press. A Dallas school teacher confirmed broadcast reports tonight that there was flippant cheering among students mixed with serious grief when the shooting of President Kennedy was announced Friday. Joanna Morgan, a teacher at a Dallas junior high school, said in an interview the flippant attitude was not representative of the entire student body and that it came mostly from a reaction to the first news that Mr. Kennedy was shot, not the bulletin that he was dead. Now, it was only about 30 minutes between those two, but whatever. A Dallas minister, the Reverend William Holmes of North Haven Methodist Church, first mentioned the school cheering in a sermon Sunday, Religion of White Supremacy. He repeated his remarks tonight over CBS television in a taped interview on the Walter Cronkite program. I got to see if I can find that. Oh my God. Let's see. Many Dallas radio stations denied the report. And see, they got to lie. Miss Morgan, the daughter of Methodist minister Dr. William Morgan of the University Methodist Church in Austin, said she called one station to say she personally heard the reaction. You certainly could tell which ones came from a background where there was no respect for the office of the president, she said. Miss Morgan said the students and teachers heard the news over the school intercom system just before the classes changed, and that some students went whooping down the hall. Spell it W-H-O-O-P-I-N-G. Whoop. There it is. Saying as they whooped, we're free. And what Miss Morgan called a yippee type of expression. I felt like I had been really with all of this. Like, don't you come out telling me, no, we sad. We got the Kennedy Center. We said we don't want no niggers come here getting woke at the Kennedy Center now, but we sure do miss Brother John, and it was a shame. And not all white peoples is racist, because we sure enough loved us some John Kennedy. And don't tell me nothing about that. You got white children running around in Dallas where he was killed. You got white, and I don't even have to know. I know you don't have no nigger children in Dallas talking about we're free in 1963. Please. Much less whoopee, yippee, whoopee. Are you serious? Dr. Welsing told us that they blamed it on a Negro. I was going to play that audio too. She said when it was first reported, she was in D.C., they blamed it on a Negro. You think some Negro child in Dallas is going to be jumping up and down? What? They splattered Kennedy's brains out in the street. Whoopee! Jubilee! The chicken's coming home. That's what you crackers get out. Are you serious? Are you out of your cotton-picking mind? Yippee. Please. And they put that in context. It was a whole lot of that. It was a whole lot of that in Dallas specifically. Their white parents probably the ones who put that in the newspaper talking about wanted for treason and got a picture of President Kennedy up. That was the atmosphere in Dallas. Old nigger-loving president round here trying to hire Abraham Bolden, the rest of these old niggers and the rest of it, and make us go to school with nigger Jerry Jones. Anyway, the number 605-313-5164. The code 564943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. My last add-on, sundown towns. James Lowen had a lot to say about Dallas. It's one of those areas that has lots of close suburban sundown towns that have park on the end where it's all white people that love Emmitt Smith and the Dallas Cowboys. Yippee! Let's see. Folks who dialed in with a hand up. If you have commentary, proceed.
May I be heard?
Shamika Harris. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Evening, Gus and listeners. So in Chapter 10, there was a part where they were talking about, before that. Okay. It said, on June 12th, the court heard Howard's motions. The judge denied our motion for a list of witnesses who were to appear in the trial. Now, I thought the prosecution had to turn over a list of witnesses to the defense as part of the discovery process, but, maybe things were just different in 1964 because when we checked last week, they didn't even have the Miranda rights yet. So there's that. He said, I couldn't help but notice that the only non-white faces on the jury belonged to one Negro and one Mexican. Now, when I first started writing my notes, I was like, Mexican is not a racial classification. Then I was like, wait a minute. He called them non-white. So, I had to correct that. And it felt like the audio segment at the beginning where he said tying knots, and then he corrected it and said something else. So that part, I was just, I appreciated that he said non-white. He said no official transcript of the opening statement made by the government that day can be found. I thought that was super interesting that they wouldn't have a transcript of the opening statement made by the government. Let's see. Oh, Frank Jones. Now, he was mentioned several times in the book, and I just did not understand that this was a non-white black person until his name had been mentioned several times. Even earlier when they said that they had dropped the charges against him, I assumed this is a white man. It took me a while to understand that he was black. I don't know whether he didn't say he was black or, I just missed it, but definitely when he walked in and they said, he had very dark skin, I'm like, oh, this is a black person. And I'd kind of missed that. And, the no charges against him and his wife, they were just co-conspirators. And I wondered if they counted as criminal informants. But a lot of times you don't always find out who the criminal informant is. These people didn't have any sort of anonymity. So, let me see. Sandra Hafford was arrested by the Chicago police when she and a man named Vito Zaccagnini attempted to cash a series of counterfeit bonds at a bank in Chicago. The fraud was discovered when one of the cashiers in the bank noticed that another cashier was cashing another series of bonds bearing the identical name of the bond payer. Now, you got to be pretty bold for more than one person to go into the bank, both of them cashing counterfeit bonds at the same time. Like, that is, wow. I thought that was interesting. just they kept Abraham Bolden, his lawyer, Howard, they just wouldn't let him do his job. Let me see. Yeah, I guess I highlighted the part when they said secret. When they said Frank Jones had very dark skin. I appreciate it. They actually put a photo of Exhibit 6. That's the letter that they said Frank Jones took to Spagnelli. I think that's his name. It was so poorly typed. It really does make me doubt if I just don't think Abraham Bolden did that, especially after all the talk he did about how the reports had to be so perfect. Let me see. In Exhibit 6, that was that piece of paper. It didn't have his fingerprints on it. I think that's important. Jurors smiling at the prosecutor, Arthur Dunn. I took note of that. When Howard asked Frank Jones about him coming to the Secret Service office, and he said when you gave the statement to the Secret Service, you had in mind all the time framing Mr. Bolden, didn't you? And then, boom, objection. And I don't even, it said objection, Your Honor. I asked that question be stricken, and it didn't even say why he objected. Don't you? I thought you usually have to give a reason. And after the objection was sustained, they said that's not a proper question. Counsel is admonished not to follow that line of questioning again. And I don't understand. Like, if he was planning to set him up, I think that's a completely reasonable question, even though he probably would have lied. But they kept him from perjuring himself with that. Let me see. Judge Perry's undermining of the defense case had grown almost comical. I don't think it's funny. He had just told the jury for all intents and purposes that unless they found that there was no connection of any kind between Frank Jones and myself, they could consider me as a possible source of the evidence. It didn't matter if the connection was part of some criminal conspiracy or if it was completely legitimate. And I just think that's massively incorrect. When Howard was questioning Mr. Spagnoli, he said, nobody promised you any assistance in your indictment. He said, I don't need any assistance. I'm innocent of the charges. And he's waving his arms around wildly. He said, that is not the question, Mr. Spagnoli. I am asking you if someone promised you something. And the judge says, let his answer stand. You have the answer. Let us just go on. But see, he didn't answer the question. He responded, but he did not answer the question. And, it's like the judge doesn't want these witnesses who are up there lying on Bolden. They're able to do this in a manner where, sometimes they're not perjuring themselves by the way they respond. And the judge completely, he seems to be in support of that. Let me see. No fingerprints on the gin bottle, not that that mattered. They didn't say that Mr. Bolden was there with that. The white agent, Agent John Russell, he gets off the elevator and he's making it seem like, John Russell is looking sad. This is the same white man who cried before. And, he said, I could see the sadness in his face and recalled how he had broken down in tears at the jail on the night of my arrest. Now he was about to take the stand against me. It does not matter how people feel. What matters, I think, is what is done. And, I don't care if you feel sad that you're racist. If you're out here practicing racism, that's what matters. And people's feelings and intents, that can't be proven at all. But, you can look at what a person does and go with that. And I just think that's a much better way to go about it, especially when you're thinking about the difference between a white person who you think is not a racist and a white person is a racist. What is it that they do differently? action-wise, if you can't think of a difference in actions between a non-racist white person and a racist white person, maybe the person you think is not a racist is a racist. And that's all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Well, I think Mr. Bolden just told us that the non-racist white man, he got the whimpering and the sniffling and see, that's what the non-racist white person does. See, in fact, they say that at the lynching photos, which I guess you might say this is version of. Sometimes, time you look off to the side, and as opposed to snickering and smiling and poking their chest out proud, holding testicles, you might see one or two white folks. I didn't want them to do that to Leroy. I told him, you leave his genitals on. Don't you cut his... They didn't listen. Not all white people is just racist. Now, to more important matters. There is a photo of Frank Jones in the Chicago Tribune. Man, I have to post it so people can comment, but I didn't know what to think. Like, let me see. Look, just based on what she said, because Shamika Harris said she didn't know that Frank Jones, I guess she thought he was white prior to today, right? So, I guess I thought he was black. I have to look back to see if they had said it before, but when I saw his picture in the paper, I don't remember being surprised. Like, I think they had told us this was a black dude before. Because I had been writing it. They said he was in cahoots with negro hoodlums. That's the way I'd been writing it. So I think they had said in the book. Either way, they have pictures of Mr. Jones in the Chicago Tribune. Man, now that this has been raised, I could just get out. What was the first thing that came to your brain computer when you saw the pictures? Superfly. Now, they only have like a headshot, but man, he has got that Jim Jones sunglasses on that looks like it might be inside. He's got his like gangster fedora on and everything. You see he's got his suit. Man, super fly. Like, and that was only a few years before. That's what I thought. Like, what in the world? Like, if I saw this dude out of there, hey, Daddy Rich. Remember Car Wash? That's what I'd be thinking. Like, Daddy Rich. Gin and juice. We heard that they got the gin. That's what I'd be thinking. Like, what in the world? Who are you running numbers or selling cannabis or what? What is what is going on? And then they said he's dark, extra black, real black. Oh my God! And you're gonna be wearing sunglasses inside. It's like, oh man, I don't know what he looked like on the jury. Maybe he took that hat off, the glasses and everything. But oh man, I would have had Superfly theme song, Curtis Mayfield, going through my brain computer, and then gin and juice, catch it up, bring it, this side. Woo! Credibility. What, man? Anyway. That was equally important, what she said about the lack of transcript. So much about, really, the system of white supremacy racism. They even talk about that with racist purges sometimes. Matter of fact, they said that Tulsa, Oklahoma. You go to get the newspaper to find what happened. You say, wait a minute. Somebody, they didn't. Master deceivers. No one does it better. You go to look for it. This isn't ancient history, man. It's a public record. Where's the transcript? Y'all couldn't afford a stenographer that day? Come on. That is so tacky and usual suspects, master deceivers. That is so important, though. You don't have the transcript for the opening. Let's see. Retired firefighter should be with us as well.
Greetings, everyone. I apologize if I say some of the same things that Ms. Harris said. I'm going to start with before the trial began, because most of the reading is over on the trial. Before the trial began, his attorney warned him wisely ordered him to do not answer any questions. I think it was reporters that he was talking about. I could be wrong. Only 2 non-white people were on the jury. I heard that before. The dollar amount that Mr. Bolden is being accused of, I think it was $50,000. I looked it up and to see on what $50,000 is today, and it comes out to $515,804.64. So he probably could have did a good job of vacationing and all over the world with that type of kind of money, and retired with that kind of money. The first witness was a white official who mistreated him while he was on the job, and it didn't improve from there in Mr. Bolden's favor. I noticed also through the first reading that Mr. Bolden still is not controlling his emotions at the trial based on what he wrote in his book. And he also mentions that the judge and the jury could detect this, and that's not good for a defendant that has a jury to make a decision. He has to do a better job with that. And it's a lesson that all of us can take under consideration, being that he's able to write that in his book. Mr. Bolden incorrectly, in my opinion, thinking that the Secret Service supported him by stating a piece of evidence / work presented at the trial couldn't be his because of his shabby appearance. And my thoughts is, the truth is, the Secret Service never cared about him at all as an employee. So he needs to be considerate of that, what I think is the truth. The whole trial seems like it's a setup. The jury, prosecutor, and the judge is helping to put him in prison for quite a bit of time. Constant pressure was being put on Mr. Bolden's attorney, as was stated. Every time he had a legitimate reason to interrupt the court proceedings, he was put down by the judge, which is something that tells you that things are not going too well for you if you're a defendant. Last but not least, all of the items relevant to the case did not have Mr. Bolden's fingerprints on them, and that's a positive thing about I would imagine about a court case, and you're the defendant, that your fingerprints is not on evidence. So that's my basic report on the first readings. Thank you for listening.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. No, you don't, tricky black people. Black people is slick. Know how to put the gloves on and all the rest of it so they don't leave no fingerprints. They say black folks slicker than a can of oil. See, and Bolden, he extra slick because he went to Secret Service school. That's where they had to nab him. And he had all the training, so he knows all the tricks, how to make sure they don't find no prints and all the right. I got my gloves and I'm prepared. Boy, I'm slick now. Caping for black dudes. Get on out of here, retired firefighter. Much obliged, sir. I think both Shamika Harris and retired firefighter, they both pointed out, even though he got a black attorney, Mr. Howard, who did correctly advise him this time, zip it. Zip it. He said the press tried to go to him. Mr. Bolden, what do you think? The cracker's trying to do this. Zip it. No comment. Great job. But even though Mr. Howard is trying to do the correct thing, the white people are not going to let him do his job. This was very common during this time period. This is 1964, so we're right about to be the genesis of the Black Panther Party, and you had lots of the same types of dynamics, black people being suspiciously charged of things. I mean, not that you hadn't had that before, but I mean, it's about to be lots of that. And you go to court, and you get an all-white jury. That's not the case here, close, but you get these all-white juries, white prosecutors, white judge. We read Last Man Standing, Geronimo Pratt, same type of thing. Totally set no chance. Johnny Cochran, a little bit of progress, I guess. OJ. Let's see. Thank you for the inflation calculator. That is a lot of money. I think he said like $500,000 today. So I mean that's a good chunk of change, right? And then the control of emotions. I think retired firefighter pointed that out. Great point. We have seen that as kind of a pattern, I'll say, last week, where the intent. Now we did. I think it was a great point. Total setup, CIA operation, might even say, where they starve him, dehydrate him, can't contact anybody, got him in this greater confinement. Got a white man looking at him and agitating him. You upset? You did it, didn't you? Did you? Can't open the windows. So, I mean, understandable to a degree. White people can really drive you crazy. And I mean, now you're in a court of law. You could be going to jail for 6 years and all of that. But I mean, hey, composure, very important. I bet Johnny Cochran talked to Renthal James about that. Now they're going to say all kinds of things about you. You're raping, no count, brute, black beast. Might even call you a double black. See, they're not going to say that we got niggers and OJ. They're going to say that nigger OJ. You can't wince. You got to just sit there and take it, black brother. We're going to make it through. You can't sit there and line cracker. I didn't say that. Composure. Very important. Let's see. The star 61 if you have another comment. Folks, we missed before we get to second session. Quickly, email number 1. We had articles. I said there's Newsweek. I did get all the articles that I mentioned, plus extra. Newsweek, 1964. Chicago Tribune has lots. They probably have reports like all throughout the trial because that's local, during all this time. I mean, it's such a fail. I wish we had talked to Dr. Welsing, Lauren Questlove. Like, man, Pam, maybe. It's a little early for Pam. But still. Chicago, man, big miss. Saw the movie Executive Action. It was chilling in terms of the unemotional. Now contrast. Mr. Bolden, understandably so, upset, mad, got it. The white people in this film plotting to kill the white president of the United States. Calm. Methodical. Very racist white supremacist behavior. Had some major actors in it. Burt Lancaster, who used to be Superman, is in this film. And others. And weaving in and out of actual footage of Kennedy was impactful to me. Oliver Stone does the same thing in JFK. Movie was seemingly panned by most critics. Knowing what we know about the influence of the CIA and the media, and particularly the press, makes you go, we don't even know enough about the press and what have you in terms of how many people, because Oliver Stone said the same thing happened to him when JFK was released, that it was, he made up all this nonsense, and then it turns out now you get these documents that he was correct about lots of what he had to say. How many of these individuals for the press, mostly white, maybe all white, and then Wanda Coleman came out to say bad things and talk bad, man, Executive Action is trash, man, it's the worst film ever, and he just some revisionist history and made all this up. Let's see. I recall from the Mayor's Jonestown book that he said the CIA did their dirty deeds always through proxies and not be their actual agents. Maybe the mafia, Cuban nationals, Southern racists, and agents of the Israeli government were all proxies of the CIA, and they were just sitting back seeing who would get the job done. Subcontractors, lots of that, and that way you have what they call it, that plausible deniability. But I say the same thing. Now, if all these people are racists, that just means that you have racists working together, racists at different levels, more powerful racists, less powerful racists. They all have different jobs, but now all the way down to those children in Dallas, you see the end of this is that, hey, that nigger-loving Kennedy, who was racist suspect at minimum, nigger-loving Kennedy, man, I'm so glad. What, yippee, woo! That's what you see the end result, you know. Now, maybe they know more, maybe they know less, but the end is, this was a white person. We're upset. We did not like how he was running the plantation, and more powerful racists. You out of here, buddy. Beat it. Beat it. Chapter 10. I couldn't help but notice the only non-white faces on the jury belonged to one Negro and one Mexican who could be white. It must be rare to have a jury made up of a majority of non-white people in the U.S. I could not find a statistic with a clear breakdown of racial categories of persons on juries, including separation of civil trials and criminal trials in the U.S. I found data on selection pools and who gets chosen from the jury pool, but not who actually sits on a jury broken down by race. The sinister and racist practice of infecting death penalty juries. That O.J. again, I do think the O.J. Simpson jury was mostly non-white people. Now, I have to go back to get the exact numbers. I know it was mostly female, but I think it was mostly non-white people, easily, on the O.J. Simpson jury. Not that that was why he was exonerated. 2. No official transcript of the opening statement made by the government that day can be found. I had a hard time processing this chapter, maybe because I was disturbed by how flimsy the evidence seemed. Taking the word of crooks and no wire evidence, no actual money transfer, he never had a chance. Finally, after all that, they destroyed part of the transcript of a trial of this significance. They lost President Kennedy's brain. That's what I'm saying. Like, there was so much of that during this time period of, oh, we lost it. Oh, we lost it. But that was really important about, we lost it. Sorry. When did you lose it? Who lost it? Like, it was so much master deceit. And then, see, now that's another one that you are just incompetent, that we're just whoopsing, and we just can't keep up and stumbling and fumbling. And, oh, man, I would lose my eyeballs if they weren't in my head. Come on. Come on. Let's see. 3. I did notice that one of them smiled at the prosecutor. Didn't get that far. We got to stop right there. We will resume chapter 2. Something quick I need to get in before we get to chapter 2. Let me go back to the beginning. They do have the picture of the note. I guess it would have been cool if they could have included a quick picture of Mr. Jones in the book, just so that people... I think they did tell us that he's black, but whatever. Let's see. Being a parent through all that, I cannot imagine, like, how, because he talks about getting their children ready and then they go off to court. I cannot imagine how Mr. Bolden's children were impacted by all of this. Like, oh my God. What? Like, you're a Negro. That's just one. In the city that Dr. King said is the most racist place ever. 2, your dad is a Secret Service agent like the police. Now, I don't know how they probably, it might be a whoopee or, nigger police. Like, what? And now he's saying that the laxity contributed to JFK. I do not have any idea how that would have been processed by the general public or black people specifically at that time. It was not like a cool, I cannot imagine that making you a cool black person to say that. Like, wow, that Mr. Bolden is something. I want to hang out with him. Like, what? at minimum, like, man, the people that blew Kennedy's brains out might do the same thing. Man, get out of my, man, no, don't get off my porch. Get away from me. What? Congratulate him. Get on. Or he did do it. He's in cahoots with that Mr. Jones out here stealing $500,000 and all the rest of them, man. Ought to be shamed. Had all that potential. You done embarrassed good John Kenneth. Like, I mean, I can't even imagine. There's lots of newspaper articles, the Chicago Defender, Chicago Tribunes. You can go back and read, but I mean, why? And we got to the end of all this. By 71, Mae Brussel was talking about Abraham Bolden as they railroad. She wasn't saying that no-count scoundrel Abraham Bolden. She was saying, oh, man, these racists railroaded Mr. Bolden. That is a part of what happened in Dallas. That's what she was saying. She was talking about the Chicago plot specifically to kill him there, which he mentioned in the audio we played today. Anywho, but I can't imagine how this would have impacted his children to go through all of this and just seeing this happen to their dad is going to prison for like, what? What? Jesus Christ. And they're getting threats and all that. Man, Jesus Christ. Let's see. Anything else? Let's see. That I get through really quick. Have all these white people out to get you. No chance. The questions for the man, when he talks about the people that were going to be on the jury and how they even got a black person on the jury is kind of astounding to me. I literally just got the question like days ago. I just got the questions that they posed to the Sade Robinson jury in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And that, I mean, we know from the O.J. Simpson trial, that is so important. The instructions that they get and all the rest of it. And man, this is like, I said the Mexican, whatever that means. That could be a white person, but okay, we'll say it's 2 non-white people on the jury. Then all these white people, like, oh my, are these white people on the jury? Are these white people who also think Kennedy is a Negro lover? Oh my God, no chance, no chance. Let's see. We will get to it. If you have additional thoughts, didn't get to share, write it down. We'll see if we can get through all of Chapter 10. The Echo from Dealey Plaza. Not late, he's still with us. He's still with us, rolling strong in his 90s. Mr. Abraham Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza, audio segment 2, the Katherine Massey Book Club.
During the cross-examination, John Russell admitted that there was a rear entrance to the Secret Service office that was often left unguarded and unlocked. He confirmed that the door leading into the office was often left ajar, and an unauthorized person could enter the office without being noticed. He further testified that while searching the home of Frank Jones after Jones's arrest on May 18th, the Secret Service found Spagnoli's telephone number written in an address book near the telephone. In answer to Howard's question, Russell confirmed that the telephone number did not appear anywhere in the summary report. "Did you ask Agent Bolden for the copy of the report that had been issued to him?" Howard asked. "Yes, sir, I did." "What did Mr. Bolden tell you he did with his report?" "He stated he had given it to Cross," Russell replied. "Did you have occasion to ask Agent Cross if, in fact, Agent Bolden had given him the report?" Howard asked. "No, at that time Agent Cross was not available, and I was informed later that inquiry had been made of him and he did not have the report." "Then, at the time Sandra Hafford's hair was changed, Agent Bolden was not the only agent in the office who knew this change was going to be made, was he?" "No, sir. It was common knowledge," Agent Russell answered. His eyes darted quickly toward Sykes, who was leaning slightly forward in his chair as if he were about to object to the line of questioning. The dyeing of Sandra's hair and the fact that she was secreted in the Conrad Hotel was common knowledge among the agents in the office. "No further questions, Your Honor," George Howard announced, bringing the trial session to a close. "I had previously explained to my attorney that the situation with Sandra Hafford had been discussed at a staff meeting on May 6th. Near the end of April, Sandra had actually come into the Secret Service office and spoken with Agent Russell. We knew that over the weekend of May 1st, a secretary from our office, June Marie Terpinus, had been dispatched by SAIC Martineau to stay with Sandra in the hotel after Sandra had called our office, and said she was not only afraid of being alone there, but also lonely. During that weekend, June had listened on another line when Sandra phoned Joseph Spagnoli and professed her love for him. It was Sandra, along with Vito Zaccanini, both of whom had been arrested while trying to pass a series of counterfeit bonds at a Chicago bank, who had provided the information on the basis of which Russell had initiated the summary report now at the center of my case. In the May 6th meeting, all of the agents in the Chicago office were informed of Sandra's whereabouts, the name she was under, and the fact that she had contacted Joseph Spagnoli while in protective custody. Chapter 11. We arrived at court early enough the next morning to watch some of the jurors and attorneys file in. Judge Perry opened the session without delay, and the government called Agent Conrad Cross to the witness stand. Cross, looking like a young doctor in his dark gray suit, told the jury that he had been a Secret Service agent for about 3 years, prior to which he had worked as an agent for the Internal Revenue Service. He added that he and I had worked together on several occasions, including the time around May 14, 1964. As Cross spoke, my attention was caught by a large brown-skinned woman opening the door to the courtroom and taking a seat in the spectators' gallery. I was stunned to see my mother, Ophelia, gazing at me. The hurt in her eyes belied the wide smile on her face. I also saw one of the jurors register that the woman who had just entered was my mother. There was an eerie symbolism to my mother arriving at just that moment in the trial while Conrad Cross was on the stand. Only a few months earlier, in February 1964, Cross and I had been dispatched to St. Louis, Missouri, as part of President Lyndon Johnson's protective detail. Johnson had come to St. Louis to make a speech at the Chase Hotel there. The day after the speech, Agent Cross accompanied me as I stopped by my parents' house in East St. Louis, just across the river in Illinois, before we drove back to Chicago. We sat for about an hour, chatting with my parents and one of my sisters. As Cross and I were getting into the car, my mother called me back into the house for a moment. "That fellow you brought here," she began, "how long have you known him?" "Oh, Mom, is that what you called me back here for? He's my partner in Chicago. I work with him every day." "Don't trust him," my mother warned through her clenched teeth, waving a finger in my face. "He's a snake. The whole time he was here, he didn't look me in the eyes one time. I'm telling you, son, don't you trust him any further than you can see him." At the time, I thought my mother had perhaps become a little paranoid and had formed the wrong opinion of Cross. Now, as I watched him fidget in the witness chair, it seemed more likely that my own opinion of him had been off the mark. Sykes asked Cross if he had received an onion skin copy of the summary report from Agent Bolden on or about May 8th, and Cross answered that he had. "And what, if anything, occurred at the time you received this material?" Sykes continued. "On May 8th, Bolden came into my office and laid the report on my desk and left the office. I glanced at it momentarily and then laid the report on my desk. I left the office and returned after being out of the office for about 25 minutes. When I walked back into the office, I noticed that the copy of the onion skin copy of the report was missing from my desk." Then Agent Cross told the jury, "We were conducting investigations on the south side of Chicago, and we were riding together, at which point Mr. Bolden said to me, 'What would you do if you had $50,000? I told Bolden that if I had that kind of money, I would buy a building and go into business for myself.'" "That's a lie," I hissed at Howard. I stared coldly at Cross, who looked away. "He's lying," I repeated, ignoring the stares of the judge and the jurors. My attorney shielded his mouth with his hand and whispered sharply, "Calm down." Judge Perry stared in our direction, as did Sykes, standing motionless by the witness box, as if waiting for the jurors to follow his gaze in our direction. "Your witness, counsel," he said somewhat smugly. As he sat back down at the prosecution table, Sykes and his co-counsel Arthur Dunn whispered and smiled knowingly to each other. George Howard approached Cross in the witness box and said, "Agent Cross, You have testified that on or about May 8th, the defendant came into your office and gave the onion skin copy of the report to you. Is that correct? Yes. And it is your testimony that you thumbed through the report, laid the report on your desk, and left the office. Is that correct? Yes. Was the defendant in the office when you left the office or when you returned some 25 minutes later? No, answered Cross. He was not. Did you ever see the defendant with the report after he gave it to you on May 8th? Howard asked, striding back and forth calmly in front of the jury, carefully framing each question. No, sir. When was the next time that you were asked about the report? Howard asked. Around May 15th, Michael Turina came to my office and asked me if I had the copy of the report, and I told him that the report had been lost. After the report was lost in your office on May 8th, did you ever look for the report? No, I didn't, Cross maintained. Inspector Michael Turina, Agent Bolden, and Agent John Russell asked me about the report, but I didn't look for it because I knew that I didn't have it. Even though you had previously placed the report on your desk? Howard asked, shooting a meaningful look at the jury. Because I knew I didn't have it, Cross answered. Objection, Your Honor, boomed Richard Sykes for the prosecution. Your Honor, I am going to object to these two last questions unless counsel again makes representation that he intends to offer proof to prove the positive assertions implied in those questions. Objection sustained, Judge Perry declared, with a hint of annoyance. The objection will be sustained, and the questions and answers will be stricken unless there is positive proof made of the questions for which you are now laying foundation. Howard changed his tack. Now, Mr. Cross, you state that this statement was made on the 20th of May, 1964, and you signed it, and you say that on or about May 11th, 1964, in the afternoon, I was riding with Abraham Bolden in an official U.S. Secret Service car, and you state that in essence that he said, "What would you do if you had $50,000? Is that right?" Yes, this was the conversation, Cross answered nonchalantly. And you stated that if you had $15,000 you would probably buy a building or go into some business or something. Was that your answer? Is that what you wrote? Howard probed. That's right. Now, this statement was given, did you, Agent Cross, seek to buy a building on or about May 4th, 1964? The prosecution knew that Howard was headed into Cross's dealings with the Dwyer Real Estate Company around the time that the file was lost in his office. The government had taken precautions to ensure that the Dwyer matter would not come before the jury. Objection! Sykes shouted. Objection sustained, said the judge, obviously disturbed by the question put to Agent Cross. When I sustain an objection, Mr. Witness, the judge continued, you don't have to answer. No further questions, said George Howard, and Cross was excused. During the recess that followed, my mother came out to the balcony overlooking the rotunda and took me into her arms. She didn't plan on staying in Chicago, she explained. She just needed to see with her own eyes that I was all right. Barbara and I introduced her to George Howard. You take care of my son, Mr. Howard, she said. The tears in her eyes and the quiver in her voice brought the emotion up in me as well. He's going to be all right, George said. I'm going to do my best. After the recess, the government called June Marie Turpinus to the stand. Dressed in a prim white blouse and black skirt, the blonde, blue-eyed secretary from our office nervously made her way to the stand. June testified that she had worked in the Secret Service office for about 5 years. On May 11th, she said, Bolden told me that Agent Russell would not tell him where Sandra Hafford was. I told Bolden that Hafford was in the Conrad Hilton Hotel under the name of Mrs. J. Lloyd Stocks. She burst into tears as she told the jury that on May 13th she went into my office and listened to a tape playing in the next office of a recorded conversation between Sandra Hafford and Joseph Spagnoli. Working hard to compose herself, she went on to testify that she had been taking dictation from me on May 14th when I received a telephone call. When Bolden hung up the telephone, he told me that his informant, Walt, had some information for him. June was crying softly as Prosecutor Arthur Dunn finished his direct examination and George Howard stood to approach the witness box. "Mrs. Turpinus," George began, "you say that Mr. Bolden told you on the morning of May 11th that Agent Russell refused to tell him where they were keeping Sandra Hafford?" "He said, Agent? No, he didn't tell me that. He said he thought he was busy. I can't really remember." "Mrs. Turpinus, did you know on May 11th, 1964, that Mr. Bolden had been one of the arresting officers in the case involving United States government versus D'Antonio and others?" "Yes," June answered softly. "Mrs. Turpinus, do you know whether it was common knowledge in your office or not where Sandra Hafford was kept?" "Well, it was common knowledge that she was an informant, but only a few knew where she was being kept." Next, Howard tried to get the secretary to confirm that I'd had previous dealings with Frank Jones during the course of an investigation, but the prosecution objected, and the judge upheld those objections. With this important line of questioning blocked, Howard changed direction. "Now, Mrs. Turpinus, when you were in the hotel with Sandra Hafford on May 9th, did you engage in conversation with her there?" he asked. Again, Dunn was on his feet with an objection. "I do not know what the question is going to be or the answer is going to be, but I think we are pretty far afield." The judge excused the jury while the matter was discussed further. The judge asked Howard the nature of his question, to which Howard replied, "I would like to ask her, Your Honor, if Miss Hafford told her on May 9th that she knew that Spagnoli had an inside contact in the Secret Service." Dunn objected once again, stating that there was no evidence at all, with the exception of my own activities, that Spagnoli had a contact in the Secret Service. After a brief discussion of the issue, the judge permitted Howard to bring out the fact that Sandra Hafford was afraid for her safety. However, in pressing the issue, Howard had inadvertently played right into the hands of the prosecution, and he knew it. "No further questions, Your Honor." The frustration was evident in Howard's voice, and now, for the first time, his posture showed more discouragement than confidence. Judge Perry wasn't going to let him do his job the way he wanted to, the way he needed to. The government's case against me was building. Jones and Spagnoli were well prepared for their testimony, which all matched up very neatly, much too neatly for anyone who was really paying attention. As we stood outside the courtroom during recess, 2 Secret Service agents got off the elevator, escorting Richard Walters, the man who had shown up at my house asking for a gun with which he could take care of Frank Jones. The agents, Jordan and Sims, could barely suppress their smirks. Walters, who used to say things like, "I love you like a son, Abe," but who was there that day to help send me to prison, glanced fleetingly in my direction, but mostly kept his quivering gaze on the floor in front of him. Sykes put Richard Walters on the stand after a recess and guided him through his story. Walters told the court that he could neither read nor write and had been an informant for the Secret Service for a number of years. Walter testified that sometime in 1963, "Bolden sent me to tell Frank Jones that if he would play ball, Bolden would give his counterfeiting plates and Pontiac car back to him. At some other time, Bolden told me that we were all going to be rich because he had sent a man named Ed Jones to tell some fellow how to get rid of some checks and bonds for 50 or 60,000. Bolden told me that he had tried to use Jones as a stool pigeon," Walters said, "but Jones double-crossed him. Later, when Bolden came to see me, he told me that things were going bad at the office and that the G's had called everybody in the office except him. He said that Jones needed killing with a shotgun and that he had $500 for anyone who ups and kills Jones." Later, during Howard's cross-examination, Walters said that "Bolden never mentioned a file or the name Spagnoli to me." "Now, Mr. Walters," Howard continued, "did you give a statement to the Secret Service concerning your meetings with Agent Bolden?" "Yes, I did." "Did you read the statement before you signed it?" "No, I can't read." They read the statement to me. In the statement, George pressed, you said that Bolden said he would give me a shotgun to kill Frank Jones with. Is that correct? Yes, Walters answered. I said that. Bolden said Jones needed killing. He didn't give me no gun. The cross-examination of Walters was very contentious. Walters could not recall any of the dates, times, or months pertaining to his testimony, often answering specific questions with, I don't know. All I know is this is 1964. I don't remember what month I was out there. I don't know what time it was. The judge and Dunn often interrupted the questioning in an attempt to clarify Walters' answers for the jury. No further questions, said George Howard. Richard Walters slowly climbed down from the witness box and dragged himself toward the courtroom doors, a Secret Service agent on either side of him. He turned for a moment and looked back at me with sadness in his eyes. I knew this experience had been painful for him, but he had been helpless at the hands of the manipulative government agents and attorneys. In that moment, I forgave the old man. Richard Jordan seemed always to be in a hurry, and today was no different. He scurried up to the witness stand. As he raised his hand to take the oath, he glared at me. Sykes drew the necessary information out of him. On May 18th, Jordan said, I was alone with Bolden in the United States Attorney's office. Bolden told me that Jones had ample opportunity to steal the file from Bolden's car and that he and Cross had seen Jones at McDonald's hamburger stand on May 11th, 1964. Bolden further said that Jones was in his car on May 11th and could have stolen the report then. Jordan told the jury that he'd interviewed me in the Secret Service office in preparation for a polygraph test. I told Bolden when was the first time he knew the agents were going to have Sandra Hafford's hair dyed. Bolden said that he didn't know that and that I was the first one to tell him that. A few minutes later, Bolden said, I didn't even know that she was going to have her hair dyed red. When I asked Bolden who had said anything about red hair, Bolden told me that I did. Jordan testified. Actually, I hadn't mentioned the color at all. George Howard didn't get much out of Agent Jordan, except to have him confirm that he was part of the scheme to mislead me into coming back to Chicago for a non-existent counterfeiting investigation. Jordan testified that he was carrying out direct orders from his superiors when he took part in that deception. The situation looked bleak as the court session ended. It was a rough day, said Howard. They're coming at you with both barrels, and the judge is helping them all he can. This is the toughest case I've ever had to deal with. I see what their strategy is, George, I offered. They're mixing truth with lies. I never said anything to Martineau about a typewriter or about Sandra's red hair to Jordan. They are injecting those allegations for the obvious effect they're having on the jury. They're making it seem that I was trying to conceal something, and that I didn't have the control not to blurt out statements against my own interest. It's a dirty game, Abe. They're putting words in your mouth, and the judge is letting them. We need access to the Secret Service's case files to show that Martineau had official knowledge that you were working on the Jones case. Howard had already filed a motion about those documents, but it had been turned down. I would like to go into the Court of Appeals and file a writ for those case files, but that's going to cost more money and time, and the judge would probably be against holding up the trial so that the appeal can be heard. I don't see how we can prove anything unless I take the stand. The next day, the government called a series of witnesses who substantiated parts of the story they had already created. One Secret Service agent, John Sokol, confirmed that Spagnoli had identified Frank Jones from a photograph, and that he interviewed Spagnoli and heard Spagnoli say that Jones had come to his house and tried to sell him an excerpt of a report. Mary E. Myers from the Illinois Bell Telephone Company verified that a phone number found in Jones's possession belonged to Spagnoli. Louis Calvin Hall, Richard Walters' nephew, confirmed that Richard Walters had had a conversation with me on the front porch of my house. Howard rose and approached the bench, where he was met by Sykes and Dunn. He announced that he intended to move for a directed verdict, and Judge Perry had the jury removed from the courtroom, so that the arguments could be made outside of their presence. Your Honor, Howard said firmly, at this time, on behalf of the defense, we move for a direct acquittal, the reason for this being that there has been no evidence in this case that will show that the defendant has committed any of the acts that were set forth in the indictment. Statements have been made, but all of the statements, all of the evidence that has been introduced here, does not in any way show that Mr. Bolden is guilty of having committed the acts of which he has been accused. One could almost hear the confidence returning to Howard's voice as he made his impassioned plea before the court. The motion is denied and the defendant directed to proceed, if he elects, with the defense. Do you elect to call your defendant or what? The judge said impatiently. I would have to go on the stand. In many arguments during the trial, Howard had represented that he would offer affirmative proof that contradicted the testimony of several government witnesses. I was the only person who could offer that proof to the court. Howard told me that I would be the first witness after the recess. The main thing you have to do, he admonished, is keep your cool. Just tell the truth as you have told it to me, and let me direct the questioning. You're going to have to be careful and not become angry during cross-examination. They're going to try to make you angry and inflame you on the stand. You know how to testify, so be at your best, and I think we will come out of this all right. I was thinking about more than just the verdict. George, I think that I should tell the jury what I really believe this is all about. I told you what Inspector McCann said about me not being a team player. Jordan testified that we were alone all of the time, so that shows they are trying to cover something up. He didn't want McCann's name to come up. Somehow they knew that I tried to call J. Lee Rankin, chief counsel for the Warren Commission, through the White House switchboard. I think, Abe, do you realize what you're saying? If you do that, even if we win this case, you're not going to be able to reclaim your job in the Secret Service, Howard advised. I'm not worried about ever going back into the Secret Service, George. I just think we have to defend against Jones's testimony, Howard insisted. How are we ever going to prove anything about what happened in Dallas? You weren't in Dallas. You have a chance to win this case as it stands now, and I don't want you to complicate things more than necessary. Judge Perry isn't going to admit anything about Kennedy or what happened in Dallas into evidence in your trial. The only thing that you would accomplish by bringing Kennedy into this is to put your life and the lives of your wife and children in jeopardy. You're dealing with people who killed the president on the street in broad daylight. You have to think about the effect of what you want to do on your family. My attorney was not only adamant, but also more than a little upset. I had worked hard trying to keep my nerves in check as I prepared to make my case. Many nights my mind raced as I tried to make some sense of all the fantastical testimony and to get some kind of grip on the many conflicting emotions inside me. When I thought about the end of my career as a trusted and valued agent of the federal government, I felt both anger and a wistful sadness. Here I was about to defend myself against accusations made by the very same bad guys I had been chasing all those years. And yet I found I had no bitterness, or even any real anger, toward Frank Jones and Joseph Spagnoli. They were my accusers, to be sure, but they weren't the brains behind any of it. Jones was facing his third conviction and the likelihood of a life sentence, and I was sure he was just doing whatever he thought he had to do in order to save himself. I knew I probably would have done the same thing. No, the real villains were my own colleagues and peers at the Secret Service. The agents themselves, sworn to uphold and enforce the laws of the country as I was, had engineered this masterly plot and made it possible. After the short recess, George Howard announced, "The defense calls the defendant, Abraham Bolden, Your Honor." I was no stranger to the witness box, having testified countless times in criminal cases on behalf of the Secret Service. But speaking in my own defense was something entirely new.
Something entirely new. Might need to practice a bit at that. I hope I bet Johnny Cochran they did practice time with old Renthal James. So, oh, matter of fact, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. Renthal James didn't testify. Smart. See, that way we don't have to worry about Renthal. What you call me? Look here, you know that. Never mind. Never mind. Never mind. Just zip. Zip. Alrighty. I wonder if they talked about that. Did Mr. Oh, he's the only one. They didn't have. Jeez. Woo. Tough choices. Let's see. The number to dial 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. That last portion right there, I'm so glad that he included that, and that Mr. Howard. Oh, Mr. Howard has a book, Jiminy Crickets. I forgot. Let me go back. Forgive. Reading is more important than watching television. Mr. Howard has a book. It is, hey, the autobiography Kings. But Mr. Howard has a book, 50 Years at the Bar and Still Sober, an autobiography. Talks about growing up, and this case would have to be in there, right? Right? Anyway, on my wish list, Gus T. Renegade, Amazon.com. But either way, you can get it for yourself. Wow, it's expensive too. I don't know, it must be out of print. But 50 Years at the Bar and Still Sober. A case like this will drive you to drink. Anyway, but that's one. Two, because I was thinking, like, I hope he wrote a book or somebody wrote a book about his life and then he wrote a book. Hey, okay. Now, two, listening to Mae Brussel. That section where Mr. Howard says, WTH, Bolden, Jesus Christ, this is not the time to pull out the JFK conspiracy and who shot who in Dallas and Grassy. We are trying to get you. Matter of fact, the people who blew his brains out in broad daylight, that's who we're up against. They did that to a white man in the middle of a crowd at high noon. What do you think they will do to you, negro? Get it together. What do they do to your family, your children? They'll kill you all. Dead as fried chicken. Get it together. Exactly. Now, that is kind of scary because, like I said, now, some people have said people didn't talk like that before. They will get you, man. Get your act together. Even though certainly white people got a lot of folks before that, a lot of niggers. But people didn't really talk like that. They will get you if you say the wrong thing or act up or whatever. Anyway, so this is from, get the date correct, Tuesday, April 7, 1970. Something about that is, right, it's April 11. Tuesday, April 7, 1970. JFK data hidden. Skolnick. Now I'm skipping down to get to the Bolden portion, even though some of the earlier part of all this is significant as well. Oh, and it talks about the Chicago plot and all this, so it is important, and we would recognize. And it even gets into, I say all this is connected, because it even gets into the assassination of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in Chicago. But I'm not going to read that part. We're going to skip down. Part I'm going to get to quick. Let's see. Skolnick scuffed out a report from the assassination investigation, which stated that no individual by the name of Oswald was arrested on such charge, unlawful use of weapons, on November 2nd, 1963, although the researcher claims that Thomas Arthur Vallier could be mistaken for the person known as Lee Harvey Oswald. According to Skolnick, a Secret Service agent named Abraham Bolden was arrested and imprisoned virtually because he planned to reveal Secret Service laxity, insobriety, and other matters in respect to the assassination. Alleging that Bolden had discussed his plans to testify before the Warren Commission, Skolnick said the agent was ratted on, in quotes, by his partner Conrad Cross. That might be what Mr. Fuller references as no snitching. Continue. Bolden, on a pretext of participating in an investigation, was then flown from Washington to Chicago. Skolnick charges and was escorted to the office of the then U.S. Attorney Edward Hanrahan. Bolden, according to Skolnick, was not allowed to leave the room for any reason and was then charged by Martineau with having attempted to sell a government document in respect to a counterfeiting case. Skolnick claims that although the main witness against Bolden later confessed perjury, Bolden nevertheless was kept falsely imprisoned after serving 39 months in prison. I guess, spoiler alert. Bolden has since been released on 2.5 years probation. Skolnick said that former agent and his family have been threatened on several occasions, and that Bolden is afraid of further reprisals if he discusses the matter now. From time to time, according to Skolnick, Bolden has made the statement, "I have evidence that a member of the Secret Service had a part in the planning of the assassination. Someone, an agent, could be indicted on it." I will stop there. But I mean, now, if that's true, this is in the paper, if that's true, one, I'm surprised he's alive. Two, I'm for sure, all that last week, I'm going to get a gun, and we were talking about wire. No. I think that was get that gun and then turn around and shoot him and tell him that it was a struggle and all this and blah, blah, blah. And he wanted you to kill somebody and you didn't want to do it. And he tried to shoot you and you all fought over the gun and you kill him. Kill his wife, too, if she's there. Kill his children, too. They're going to kill him. I'm stunned that he managed to live through all of that. He could have easily been killed in prison, especially this nigger has evidence that one of us, which is not hard to believe at all. What, all nigger loving this and I wouldn't take a bullet, that's not hard to believe at all. He had evidence. Oh my Lord. I am stunned he lived through all this. Wow. Katherine Massey Book Club. Folks who dialed in, if you have context or commentary to share, feel free. This is one of those cases, like if you are a Chicago red, this is what I mean, like local history, like, oh my God. Just the Chicago Tribune alone. You can start from November 22nd, 1963, or actually you have to back up to when Kennedy was going to come to Chicago and all this, because that's in the paper too, that, assassination attempt here, and so go back and get that, and then go forward through the coverage and what they said, and then if you go through 64, Chicago Tribune and Chicago Defender, because that's a really important black publication, they got tons of articles on Abraham Bolden. All before he was arrested and them being proud he's in the service and blah, 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 and then the case and all that. So you could read the Chicago Defender, the Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times. Like, if you are in Chicago, this is what I mean about having family projects. Like, oh, man, this is for sure one to investigate, the lifelong project. You can read Mr. Bolden's book together. Obviously, they got the audio book, so you can read that together. You can go get the articles, see if any of these records come out and have anything about Mr. Bolden. Get Mr. Howard's autobiography and see if this case is. It would have to be, I would think, at least a sentence or two. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but that's what I mean. Like local history. Really, if you live in Chicago, have connections to Chicago or Illinois in general, for sure. You should know all about Abraham Bolden, you, your children, grandchildren, like, oh yeah, this is super important. This would lead you to the JFK assassinate global system of white supremacy. And in fact, white supremacy, racism, racists responsible for Kennedy being white children in Dallas, not white children in Wyoming, Idaho, Mississippi, white children in Dallas, not even white children in El Paso. White children in Dallas. Yippee! We free. Free white in 21. They already have been saying that. But we free. Woo! And some of that is, we don't have to go to school with them niggers no more. Woo. Come on. Folks who dialed in with a hand up. Let's see if we missed you totally. Z's mommy should be with us. Did you have commentary?
Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Greetings. Yeah, I was going to say that I've been finding this book really interesting and informative. I never had heard of Abraham Bolden before reading this book. Really interesting that he's still alive and that he was recently pardoned too. So it's a lot of really good history, really informative. A couple of things that I found interesting. I also think the earlier sections were really informative in terms of the workplace racism that he experienced and how he handled it. I thought there were a lot of interesting lessons learned from that. But what I remember from the last episode, that I think they brought up, they said that he was up for a job, and in that job they were able to erase his whole history, and that it was as if he never existed. And that part really, I found really disturbing, even though I'm sure it's something likely that can be done, especially in the context of the excerpt we read today, where there was someone who was an FBI, I think, or he was an informant who was on the stand, and he couldn't read or write, and it's very scary to put your life in the hands of either the FBI, Secret Service, CIA, especially when you can't read or write, because then you're really just beholden to whatever they tell you. They can have you sign something that says that you said this and read it, and it could be written completely different because they'll read it out loud to you. And then especially in the context of they can basically disappear you. And then if there's a paper that has your name, you wouldn't even be able to read it if you had a different name. I don't know. I just found that to be really interesting and disturbing. I never knew that there was a previous plot or in Chicago to kill JFK, and I do think that, it does seem like the judge is obviously in cahoots with the prosecution, but I do kind of agree with Abraham in that maybe you wouldn't bring up that, hey, I think there's this large conspiracy about the death of JFK, but maybe just saying, I felt like, there were precautions that weren't taken or standards of operation that were not met, and I felt like me speaking out about it did cause this sort of retaliation. I don't know. I guess it's likely that the judge would probably just not even allow him to say that or cut him off beforehand. But I did agree with him in that regard to bring it up. I wanted to also bring up that there was a book that I had read maybe 2 years ago called Family of Secrets, and it's about George H.W. Bush and his father, Prescott Bush, and how they had a lot of ties to the CIA, even in the 60s. And in the book, it kind of talks about or alludes to that George H.W. Bush had some involvement in the murder of JFK. I just wanted to bring it up because it was an interesting book, and I just thought about it as we were talking, or as I was listening to this book. I can't think of other things. That's all I have to say for now. Thanks.
I pulled the plug out right when Z's mommy was about to share, and so my audio wasn't working for a second. Anyway, much obliged, Z's mommy. I was writing down the book and everything. I think I got it. Family of Secrets. I think a listener either wrote in or verbalized about George H.W. Bush. So that's the first time around, Vice President of Ronald Reagan, and his role at the CIA and suspicions, perhaps even involvement at some level in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And even with that regard, that doesn't mean that he shot John F. Kennedy or anything of that nature, but involvement, in quotes, that can mean a lot of things in terms of why you have all of these records that got destroyed, why all of these records got falsified. I mean, there's so much deception in all of this and obfuscation. There's so many ways that you can participate in the cover-up and not investigating correctly. That will go into the Warren Commission and all of that. So there's so many ways that you can participate before and after obstruction of justice, which there was lots of that too. So there's lots of ways that you can be involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Lying to the Warren Commission, that sort of thing. Let's see, other folks who dialed in. Let's see, and I thought the retaliation, I thought that was a great point too. We don't want or need to get into the whole, there was a conspiracy to assassinate JFK. Just I saw that there was a deviation from protocol, lack of professionalism, and I felt that there was some level of retaliation against me for pointing out, hey, we're not adhering to policy and procedure. That's something I talk about all the time on Neutralizing Workplace Racism every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Let's see, Shamika Harris, and that is scary. Like she said, if you they can disappear. We talked about that before. Like, why? And I mean, you thought it was scary before. Like, they could disappear you now. Like, for real, for real. Maybe even get you new fingerprints, new facial recognition and everything. It don't even, it might go, you go to the airport and TSA and you show up for real. Hey, Shamika Harris, so good to see you. Have a great flight on your way to Orlando today. I'm like, that's right, Shamika Harris. They don't know nothing about no Lauren. Shamika Harris.
Okay. Evening again, everyone. My thoughts about the last session. Right at the beginning, it said during cross-examination, John Russell admitted that there was a rear entrance to the Secret Service office that was often left unguarded and unlocked. He confirmed that the door leading into the office was often left ajar and an unauthorized person could enter the office without being noticed. Now, this whole time I have been thinking, the white people in the Secret Service just, gave whoever, Spagnoli or Frank Jones, that report. But they're saying that the door is often left open, so they could just come in there and take it if they wanted to. Let me see. When he takes Agent Cross to meet his mom, and she warns him, that fellow you brought here, how long have you known him, and blah, blah, blah. The mom tells him, don't trust him. He's a snake. And, he says at the time, I thought my mother had perhaps become a little paranoid and had formed the wrong opinion of Cross. Now, as I watched him fidget in the witness chair, it seemed more likely that my own opinion of him had been off the mark. I don't know. I would like to think that if my mom or grandma, someone like that, said something about someone, I would pay it more attention than he seemed to. But at least later he realized he'd made a mistake. Agent Cross, when he's being questioned by the attorney Howard, he asked, after the report was lost in your office on May 8th, did you ever look for the report? No, I didn't, Cross maintained. Inspector Michael Torina, Agent Bolden, and Agent John Russell asked me about the report, but I didn't look for it because I knew I didn't have it. Okay. I don't know how you can know you don't have something if you don't look for it. That doesn't make any sense at all. You can't say something isn't on or in your desk if you don't go look on or in your desk. That's just crazy talk. Let me see. He asked him a question about that $50,000 because he said, well, the book says, well, this one says 15, but it has it in brackets. But it says, and you stated that if you had 15, I think that's a mistake, $1,000, you would probably buy a building or go into some business or something. Was that your answer? Is that what you wrote? Howard probed. That's right. Now, the statement was given. Did you, Agent Cross, seek to buy a building on or about May 4th, 1964? Objection, just really fast. And the objection was sustained. And the judge told him, when I sustain an objection, Mr. Witness, you don't have to answer. Like, he wanted to say that to make sure he didn't answer even after the objection had been sustained. It's like the judge is doing he's saying improper things to influence the trial to help the prosecution. Let me see. It said, Bolden told me, oh, this is the white woman. June Marie Terpenes comes onto the stand, and she says, Bolden told me that Agent Russell would not tell him where Sandra Hafford was. I told Bolden that Hafford was in the Conrad Hilton Hotel under the name of Mrs. J. Lloyd Stocks. She burst into tears as she told the jury that on May 13th, she went into my office and listened to a tape plan. Okay. White women crying. They will weaponize their tears in order to get other people, especially non-white people, punished. Boy, that one is old as, I don't know how long they've been doing that, hundreds of years. Let me see. Oh, Richard Walters, the black male. It's like every time they bring him up, they say he could neither read nor write. And it's, just really interesting. This person can't read and write, and they have him signing a statement. And also, it's like it said, did you read the statement before you signed it? I don't understand how he signed that if he can't read or write. So I guess they had him put his X on it. And, it says that in the statement, George Press, you said that Bolden said he would give me a shotgun to kill Frank Jones with. Is that correct? And then he says, yes, Walters answers. I said that. Bolden said Jones needed killing. He didn't give me no gun. I'm like, that's not exactly, I don't know. It's a terrible idea to sign something you can't read. That they can't get access to the Secret Service files, just to know what they're going up against. I think that's pretty important. And, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, Ms. Harris. For sure, signing documents when you can't read. I think we've heard that like many times throughout the Katherine Massey Book Club. Non-white people, black people specifically, who are illiterate and they can't even, sign their name or what have you on a statement. They just got to put an X down. Like I think we've heard that over and over and over. And even like right now, I think Irie in Louisiana, she was talking about working for a program down there that was about low reading comprehension, and maybe there being some sort of correlation with violence amongst non-white people classified as black. Matter of fact, do you know where the only trial in the assassination of John F. Kennedy took place? Louisiana. New Orleans specifically, Jim Garrison. That's what the movie JFK is based on. And then the white man who was an attorney in that trial, Jim Garrison. Mae Brussel went and worked on his staff. She talked about that experience too. The FBI bugged their office. And Jim Garrison ran into the same problem, not being able to access files. government files, same thing, where you can't get files to know what you're up against, and they're uncooperative. He said, I never had this experience before. Garrison, I am the prosecuting attorney. I'm, with the state. They didn't cooperate at all. And the other that I learned since all of this, I read Jim Garrison's book, On the Trail of the Assassins, which, wow. Now, he blames this also, military-industrial complex, but that is racism, white supremacy. All that's why I said they have lots of different terms, but they just don't say, oh, this was racists who went to kill. Anyway, but so Jim Garrison, like Mr. Bolden, he lost his trial. I think his trial was a few years after Bolden's trial, but he lost his trial in New Orleans against Clay Bertrand. And he said Bertrand was a member of the CIA. That was the allegation, and that Bertrand was part of the conspiracy to kill John F. Kennedy. Oswald was born in New Orleans, unless my memory is bad. Man, he loses the trial, and they do subpoena, and they get the Zapruder film shown in that trial. It hadn't even been shown to the public yet. Wouldn't be shown to the public for another 8 years after the Garrison trial, 6-8 years afterwards. But the white judge from the Garrison trial comes out, and the same thing with this trial. Judge is not cooperative. It doesn't allow everything. It's working against Garrison, just like Bolden. The judge is working against Bolden here. The judge for the Garrison trial apparently comes out years later and says, you know what? I think Bertrand, white man, should have been convicted in that trial. I think there was enough evidence that he lied, and I think there was enough evidence that he should have been convicted. That is stunning, at least to me, for a white judge. Now, again, if he's saying he should have been guilty of what? The charge was, this is one of the conspirators in the murder of the assassination John F. Kennedy. That there was a conspiracy to do this, and this is one of the conspirators. Oh yeah, I think there was enough evidence. He was guilty. He lied through the trial, and he was guilty. And there has been evidence to come out that Bertrand was a CIA employee. Man, people. Well, I guess people do know about that indirectly, because that is what JFK is all based on. But so much, even more evidence has come out since that movie has come out in the rain. More to come with the MLK files. But that book is amazing. So you got two books today: Family of Secrets, On the Trail of the Assassins. That book is out of print. At the time I got it, was a little bit more difficult to get. You can go to used bookstores and make it like a scavenger hunt type thing. Retired firefighter in Florida. Did you have commentary to share?
Yes, sir. Second half. The name Edward Hanahan keeps coming up, and it makes me wonder, connecting the dots, that he was also involved with Bobby Seale's treatment a few years after that, based on the riots in Chicago of the Democratic Party. Democratic Party's well, the president was being picked again, and Mr. Seal was mistreated. So I guess maybe Mr. Hanahan had something to do with that also. Mr. Bolden needs to listen more to people who truly care about him, like his mother's opinion of his coworker. Is one of my thoughts in the second half. You would figure as an experienced law enforcement officer who has gone to court multiple times, that he would have prepared himself on body language and facial expressions, et cetera, while being in court, how that sways whether or not you get exonerated or go to prison. First, he should have been reluctant to bring any coworker to view his personal life, even if that coworker was black. When he brought this coworker over this house, and I can't get away from the mother. Mother support can be a constructive experience. I've had quite a few of them before mine passed away. The judge is really spoiling the defense side of the case I have down here. He is really working at it to ruin Mr. Bolden's defense. The snitch was brought in on the side of the prosecution, which is not surprising. And Mr. Bolden's white co-workers were snickering at his appearance. So that, I mean, of course, that really told him something, as far as sign language is concerned, I guess. To hear from your attorney that this case is the toughest he ever had doesn't build any confidence to receive justice when your lawyer tells you that. It wasn't looking good. The attorney, once again, he was very professional and knew what he was doing, because he advised him also, once again, to keep cool, don't show any anger. The thought came up about after the trial, if he's successful, to want to be able to regain his job as a Secret Service agent. And why would he want to be a Secret Service agent after this trial, whether he was ruled not guilty? Last but not least, talking anything about JFK would be a death sentence for him, his female mate, and children. Even if he were a white person and did that, his life would have been in some foul danger. And that's my full report. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. I think I'd said it before, like, that was not a popular opinion at the time to be talking about. I think it might be equivalent to saying there was a conspiracy. 9/11 wasn't no box cutter wielding terrorist sand niggers. This was something. It might have been that same fella we was talking about before. At least his spawn had something to do with these towers coming. It would be equivalent to that, and it would be the equivalent to a black person coming out and making that, a la Cynthia McKinney, if people remember, and how she was treated. 6-time elected Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. But it would be about the same, like, what? Even if it's true, we don't want to hear it from you. And I mean, at the time, we didn't want to hear this from we being really nobody. I wanted to hear nothing. That's why I said, like, I have to go back and look the Chicago Defender articles again, because I can't even imagine black people wanting to be like, yeah, that Bolden, like, yeah, man, or, I mean, what? That sounded a little out there, like, the drinking part, like, yeah, what? Somebody, what? I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and look at the Defender, see what they said. Finishing up our email. Chapter 10. I did notice that one of them smiled at the prosecutor, Arthur Dunn, Agent Cross, who was the last one to have the report. Each time he poked a hole in Jones's testimony or that of any other government witness, the prosecution would leap to their feet with objections, which were almost always sustained. Judge Perry's undermining of the defense case had grown almost comical. The whole thing is just so incorrect. The racial makeup of the jury, the judge's behavior, Brother Cross. He said, Brother Cross, come on. This happens on a daily basis in the global system of racism. White supremacy makes the O.J. trial and Johnny Cochran seem all the more amazing. And remember the O.J. Simpson with the Chicago connection, because Brother Henry helped him hide that knife after he butchered up them good white people. He flew out to Chicago, remember, and hid the knife, and then went through that whole charade. Like, what? They did? Oh, no, I can't believe it. Oh, and they flew him back to L.A. so he could, pretend he didn't do nothing, remember? Chapter 11. Agent Conrad Cross to the witness stand. Don't trust him. My mother warned through clenched teeth. What would you do if you had $50,000? I told Bolden that if I had that kind of money, I would buy a building and go into business for myself. That's a lie. Maybe Brother Cross that ought to be shamed. Maybe Brother Cross was the one taking the bribe, and they just pinned it on Mr. Bolden. Could be. They could have given Brother Cross a bonus. Hey, you want that business? Help us get this nigger, and then you'll be the only nigger in the Secret Service. Hey, don't they have a ring to it? See, they'll be writing articles and things about you. See. They paid William O'Neill to help him get rid of Fred Hampton. So they'll pay you. That's it. That's what I think Fuller might be talking about. That when you say snitching and all that, like Jesus Christ, don't be going lying and hey, we'll hook you up and give you a gas station and a Cadillac if you come in here and help us get Leroy. Like, come on, man. Nah, I'm not doing it. Come on. You can't give me a job and pay me to do something constructive? No. Let's see. 2. Sykes put Richard Walters on the stand. Walters told the court he could neither read or Richard Walters told him again. I knew his experience had been painful for him, but he had been helpless at the hands of the manipulative government agents and attorneys. I forgave the old man. I assume this is black. The people most to blame are racist white supremacists. Indeed. 3. The only thing that you would accomplish by bringing Kennedy into this is to put your life and the lives of your wife and children in jeopardy. You're dealing with the people who killed the president on the street in broad daylight. This may be the most important thing to learn from the JFK assassination, the immense power of racist white supremacists. That's what I mean. We cannot play them cheap. Master deceivers, they can lie about it. So, I mean, this is like crime of the century. Like, lie about who killed the president, and 60 years later it's still the best. We don't know. We don't agree with Oswald thing. We don't know. Mastered, and you'll never know. We'll do document dumps forever. You can go through there with no index, wink, and not searchable, wink, and have fun. You'll never find it. Now, master. And again, that's the most powerful white person in the world. He's supposed to have the best security in the world. We'll blow his brains out in the street. And mind you, this is master shooting. Blow his brains out while his wife is sitting next to him. She doesn't even get a scratch. All she can do is, I'm holding my husband's brains. Accurate. At least you're still alive. Accurate. If we had wanted you, there'd been 2 brains splattered all over the street in broad daylight, and God works in mysterious ways. 4. The real villains were my own colleagues and peers at the Secret Service, the agents themselves. You have no colleagues or peers, just non-white victims or suspected racists. We will pause there. We'll pause there and pick up next week in chapter 11, since we didn't get to finish all. Let's see. Quickly, I guess, notes from this week that I miss. Oh, I was going to say really quick. 1, with Mr. Bolden, perhaps maybe he should have been more prepared to be on the witness stand. I think he did say it's very different being a defendant. When you get to go in with all of that presumed credibility as an enforcement official, and white people say, oh yeah, this is our negro, listen to him, this is a good negro, and he is going to tell you what for. It is super different when they go in and say, oh man, this negro here, oh man, let me tell you about Leroy and what kind of raping no good coon this, like, oh my God, it is way, way different. Like, out of this world different. They don't even need to tell you to keep your composure, because, I mean, you just get to smile and look pretty. They just say, wear a good suit, maybe get a new tie and shave up, get a haircut and everything, and, man, go to the teeth, be gleaming, just look pretty. Look pretty, speak up loud, sit up straight, and, hey, you got it, man. Just, you'll have notes and everything. Well, it'll be great. It'll be great now. You go in as a defendant, oof, we will have to do a lot more coaching. And when you go in, when the enforcement office, they train you how to lie. See, they got whole programs and books about that. So, I mean, it is so that they don't train you how to lie as a defendant. Or do they? Let's see. He said, somehow they knew that I tried to call J. Lee Rankin, chief counsel for the Warren Commission, through the White House switchboard. I think it's not somehow. These are the most powerful white people in the world, and I can't believe he wasn't killed. When he says the main thing you have to do, he admonishes to keep your cool. That right there. Oh, I'm so nervous. Just based on what I've heard. Like, woo. And more just because I think race soldiers, they will be able, as they generally are with us, non-white people, I think they will be able to successfully manipulate his emotions. And it might be, we studied this Negro. We don't just let no random Negras on the Secret Service. Are you kidding me? We've been studying. Kennedy probably knew that Negro for years by the time he met him when he was going into the bathroom. Like, I know all about you. I had a dossier on you when I was coming into the building. Maybe before that even. We've been keeping an eye on our Negras. That's just the way things operate. That's what domination looks like. So, you know, I mean, I don't know. They might have a whole fight. And Huey P. Newton, yeah, I said it right. Dr. Huey P. Newton talked about that, man. They got a whole group of people that can just sit around and study you. Whole profiles and everything. Jonestown, CIA medical expense. So, yeah, I'm kind of nervous. Like, oh, man, they're going to be ready to get him to chimp out on that stand. Have him up there for 3 4. That's why I said, Johnny Cochran, we not going to testify. We skip all that, Renthal James. Skip all that. Let's see. I do appreciate that with Mr. Walters. You got an illiterate black dude. I don't know his exact age, but he doesn't seem like, you know, a teenager. It is so easy to manipulate any non-white person on the plantation slave ship. It is so easy, and I think that's to a degree commendable, because he could have been name calling and what this coon Walters and messed names up and embarrassed me in front of my wife and all of that. Man, this illiterate black dude, he can't even read. I don't even know what I'm signing here, man. They have me in here and say I shot John Kennedy. You know I ain't gonna be able to afford no Johnny Cochran, man. VGQ, that's VGQ, brother. Let's see. Anything else? I feel like we've seen this a lot. Privilege, and then Mr. Walters, privileged black male. Mr. Walters, yeah. Let's see. He said the Secret Service agents, Jordan and Sims, could barely suppress their smirks. Walters, who used to say things, I love you like a son, Abe, but who was there that day to help send me to prison, glanced fleetingly in my direction. Poor thing. They could blame him too, but those other agents, see now, they see, we love it. That's our favorite part of the job. And all this is lying. We love it. We're not ignorant. We love it. We are master deceivers, and we love a good lie. And this is a double whammy, because we don't just get to lie. We get to lie and send this old coon up for a good half dozen years. Might break up a whole marriage and everything. Whoop! I love it. And this CYA too, we get to cover our behind, because this coon was trying to rat on us like for real. He wasn't trying to get no money to open a liquor store or nothing. This coon trying to tell on us, saying that we was racist and didn't want to protect that nigger-loving president. The nerve. Testify for the Warren Committee. Testify as a defendant, nigger. How about that? Let's see. And even they can believe Mr. Jones. He can be, when white people say, hey, this is a respectable nigger that you can see. That's what I mean about the difference. Now, Frank Jones can come in there wearing sunglasses and looking like Shaft, a Superfly, and he's respectable Frank Jones. Any other time, Gigolo Joe. They have some old nicknames for a minute. Don't you pimp, don't you prostitute women. Isn't it true? See, it's way different going in court when white people say this is a good nigger, as opposed to, oh, you got to watch out for this one now. Any other time, Frank wouldn't be no, Mr. Jones, he wouldn't be no, and then Mr. Walters either. You got an illiterate Negro. Any other time, when would a white person, we got to get a microphone in front of Mr. Walters. What you think about this here, Mr. Walters? They could be coming to tear down Mr. Walters' house. They ain't not coming to give him no microphone. What you think about being homeless, Mr. Walters? Who cares, man? We finna get a condo here or a dog park. Let's see. And I guess we get it. His parents have the most amazing advice, like they are so brilliant. I guess the tree doesn't fall, or the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. But man, his dad told him before, hey, I see you on TV, boy. Shut the hell up. You talking a whole lot. Seem like you done upset some powerful white people. Shut the hell up. Yeah, you sound like he could have been a lawyer if it wasn't for racists. Maybe another Malcolm X. His mama, immediately, and she went to court. That's exactly what they say in the verbal behavior, verbal communication, nonverbal communication studies. Eyes, with that old tacky metaphor, eyes are the window to the soul. Who is that? He up in here, his eyeballs shifty, and he can't even, what is going on? Retired firefighter say, hey, why are you bringing somebody that you work with to meet your mother? Are you out of your loony cotton-picking mind? Oh, you don't listen to Neutralizing Workplace, right? We got Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central Chicago, 5 p.m. Pacific. Man, what in the... I say you don't even want to let them, like, be willfully giving their address. Make them go get it from personnel folder or whatever. But you don't bring them to meet your mother. What is wrong with you? Even if he could look her in the eye. What? Mom tried to tell him what is going on. This shifty looking at what? Who? How long? What? What is what? Oh, Mom, get out of here. What he was trying to... Hey, man, right on. At least hindsight. Wow. Mama is a genius. I was tripping. I should have just... Right on. I'm sorry, Mama. Let's get out of here, Cross. Brother Cross. Brother Cross. Let's get out of here, Brother Cross. Let's go. Whew. Still, he made lots of mistakes in the workplace. And the biggest one, like, oh, my God, you talk about underestimating white people. Jesus Christ. You are trying to snitch out the most powerful white people in the world, and these are armed white people with guns. And you want to go rat them out as racist drunkards? What are you? That's enough. Are you out of your cotton-picking mind? Jesus, man, get it together, Mr. Bolden. We're gonna see. They did try to put him in the middle. They did. White people say, yes, you are out of your cotton-picking mind. Whew, that ain't funny, but man, we're gonna keep reading. Let's see. We'll be here tomorrow. Compensatory call-in, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. It's so meaty, I cannot believe it, but the records are coming. I could have played the update today, but we went over time anyway, so I have to include that as we proceed. But check the news because they have updates. There are more records are coming, and MLK assassination in there. Cannot wait. Hey, man, sobriety would be best. My black brother, attorney, 50 years at the bar and still sober. Attorney George C. Howard Jr. Autobiography. There you go. Hey, you don't want to be like these race soldier Secret Service agents around here got gin everywhere and drinking, toasting and nigger joke this, nigger that. Universal woman, universal man about sobriety. Brain computer is important. That's it. Creator. Help us strive to be like Abraham Bolden. We'll be pursuers of justice. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
No problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.